Welcome everybody to the fourth leg of the Women's Speeches Championship. I'm Robert Hess. I think maybe you know that, hopefully, and I'm joined by Grandmaster Anna Muzychuk. I don't think she needs much of an introduction, but of course, I'm so glad to be joined by you, Anna. How are you doing today?
Hi, Robert. Hi to all our viewers. I'm really excited today. I'm looking forward to the new matches. Welcome everyone to the last day of leg 4 of Women's Speeches Championship. Yes, to be honest, time flew so quickly and we started this exciting tournament. Oh my God, I think it was about a month ago, while today we will know who will be the second semi-finalist, who will be tomorrow's opponent of my teammate in Ukrainian national team, Anna Ushenina. But before that happens, before the match for the first place in this leg, we will have another very cool match for the third place between Hou Yifan and Sarah Hademalshari.
We will, and I'm going to bring the bracket up to show everybody what we're looking at here because we have Hou Yifan taking on Sarah, as you just mentioned, in the third place match. Unfortunately for them, because they did not win their semifinal matchup, they cannot qualify for the super final to join Anna Ushenina, as you mentioned. And we have Humpy Conero taking on Alexandra Kostenyuk. And of course, Alexandra needs to win that match in order to move on to the super final. So, what do you think about? Do you have any predictions for today's matchups?
Any predictions? I'm not so good in predictions, but if I had to bet on someone, I would have bet on Hou Yifan and Kostenyuk.
Okay.
Well, not as if I have something against Sarah or or Hampi, but I feel that Yifan and Alexandra are a bit stronger players. But we will see. It's really unpredictable.
It
How
certainly
about
is.
you?
I don't know. I'm not good at making predictions, which is why I asked you to make them. And we do actually have the first game underway, so I will bring up the live board here. We have a Spanish. Yifan has the white pieces, and okay, I'm going to make a prediction since it's only fair. I asked you to do it. I'm going to do it as well. I'm going to go with Yifan. I do, of course, think she is the stronger player between these two, though Sarah is very capable of creating an upset. And then I'm going to go with Alexandra Kostenyuk as well because she needs to win. Whereas Humpy has defeated Hou Yifan 2 days ago, I should say. I still think that Alexandra's playing excellent chess and she needs the win to qualify. And I feel like she has all the momentum and she'll be able to do it.
Yeah, that's true. But this will be the second match. Though it's not totally fair because you said the same as I said.
We're not fighting today, Anna. We're off to a good start.
No, not of course. Yeah, the game has started. And it's a Steinitz variation on the board of the Royal Lapis.
It's something that I played growing up, the Steinitz variation. I didn't really get good positions with it, I'm going to admit. So I have some good memories, but also many bad memories. And it's kind of like the King's Indian defense with this bishop on g7 and this pawn on f5 attacking the pawn on e4. So what do you think about the position that we have right now?
Yeah, the structure indeed reminds very much about King's Indian defense, but comparing to King's Indian, here we see that we don't have light squared bishops on the board. And in my opinion, it's in the white's favor because we know that this bishop on c8, when black has it, it helps to create the attack, and it somehow helps to play f4, g5, g4, which is a typical plan for black here. While without this bishop, it's much more difficult to attack, in my opinion.
Certainly seems to be the case. At least in my playing experience, I struggle with that. And, well, Yifan, she just saw the move c6 played. She kind of has her head down, and now she brought her head up to, I guess she was thinking. You know how chess players are. Sometimes we think by staring at the ceiling. Sometimes we stare at the wall to our side. Other times we're focused on the screen or the board in front of us. But I'm with you on. I think that it can become more difficult for black to create an attack. But after c6, I mean, the question becomes which pawn captures are we looking at? Is white ever going to take on f5? Is black going to take on e4, take on d5? Which pawn captures should we be looking out for?
That's really the question, because usually it's like when we have white's pawn on d5, it's quite obvious that white will try to start their play on the queenside, while black will try to attack the king, but here we see that black played c6. Perhaps sometimes black will later on play c5. Maybe it's also an option in this position, c5 and b5, some kind of play like this.
Yeah, you can just continue expansion on the queen side. You can also consider taking on d5, because if white takes back with the c4 pawn, then you can play b5. I think in the long term, the c6 square is one that I would be a bit concerned about, but it does give black much needed space on the queen side. So as Sarah sits and starts to think here, I'm guessing she's a little worried about releasing the tension, and that's a good lesson for everybody because it's a very committal decision. Once you take on d5 or take on e4, either of these pawn captures, you are making a decision you can't take back. And if you take on e4 in particular, I think white will take back with her d2 knight, and it's good to have a knight on e4 typically against this King's Indian structure.
Yeah, the knight on e4 would be really like a monster and very well placed. And one of the problems for black in this type of structures is the bishop on g7, because we see that at the moment it doesn't have much play, and it's difficult to attack something with that bishop. So black has to take care what to do with the dark squared bishop.
Yeah, white's bishop on e3 is staring in both directions. It has more options to move to. The bishop on g7, as Anna is talking about, it's stuck there, and it's behind its own pawn on e5. So there are certain endgames that actually can be very problematic. I know the endgame seems forever away at this point, but there are certain endgames where white is just better because of the piece mobility. And Anna, a typical idea for black is to play h5, bishop h6 type of maneuver. I don't think we'll see that here, as there are too many pieces on the board to go for that just yet. But that is something that's quite standard, right? To try to trade off the dark square bishops.
Right, h5, bishop h6, it's a very good idea. Also h5, then h4, perhaps starting the attack this way. And finally, we saw that Sarah took on d5. She released the pressure on the center and she played b5. As you mentioned, b5 with the idea not to allow knight c4, knight b6 idea, to get rid of it forever. And I think her position is quite okay at the moment, though somehow we don't see this line, this Steinitz line, too often on the top level. Of course, there were some games, but it's not like an often guest in the top level tournaments.
Yeah, it certainly isn't, and that's why I struggled with it so much. I didn't have any guidance from these top players. I was like, wait, I kind of like it because there's not really so much opening theory, but then I would get in positions that were kind of cramped for black, and it was a bit of a struggle. So Queen e2 played, I guess a4 at some point is going to be a consideration for Yifan, but at the same time, what a4, I can even capture that on a4. There are oftentimes you do not want to take there, but the rook's on c1 rather than on a1, so white would have to take some time to regroup, whereas black's play at this point I think is actually getting easier and easier, and it's such a question I have for you, Anna, now is, do you play g5 as black, or do you play a move h5, or do you play knight h5? All three moves seem reasonable to make here.
I think I wouldn't play g5 because, as you have mentioned, after g5 we can take on f5 and then place our knight on e4. Mm-hmm. And I don't really like it. h5 followed by bishop h6 or followed by h4 sounds much more appealing to me. Knight h5 with the idea of knight f4, so that after bishop f4, e takes f4, we finally open the bishop, and then it will be a strong piece, not like a bad piece. But after knight h5, white has the possibility, I guess, to play g3 at some moment and cut this knight, not allowing knight f4. So, though knight h5 is, of course, should also be considered, and it's a very interesting move.
Yeah, I think now I want to play knight h5. I don't know, something about this queen set opening up is worrying me from black's perspective. So knight h5 is a move to try to kick the queen off the diagonal where it's putting pressure. And see, I don't like this position anymore. Even though I was saying there you could take on a4. A move ago, with the rook on c8, I think the queen takes a6, just stealing this pawn. I feel like these trades have favored white.
That's a real question in which favor it is, because after knight h5 on the previous move, the pawn on b5 was hanging and black had to take care of that, so they decided first to take the pawn on a4 and see what happens. And after queen takes a6, I believe Sarah wants to play a rook a8 and then try to push the a pawn. So it looks quite logical as to me. Maybe it's not the best, but nothing trivial.
Yeah. So the problem I'm having is this d6 pawn, and I mentioned this a long, long time ago, right? Where if in an endgame the d6 pawn can be a problem, and I'm still looking at this d6 pawn, and you mentioned how b5 took away knight c4. That b5 pawn is gone. In comes my knight to c4, then the d6 square, the b6 square. Feels like white is just kind of increasing the pressure, not in terms of attacking material, but moving forward in the position and creating threats that black will have to deal with.
Yes, right. Knight c4 is on agenda. Also, knight b5 sometimes. While the a pawn, well, it can come to a3 and perhaps even to a2, but maybe then it will be a weakness because it will be attacked when it comes to a2. So f takes e4 was played, and now a big question: how will white recapture? They recaptured with the pawn, not with the knight.
Yeah,
this time.
That was a good question, actually, about which to take with. She takes with the pawn, and I'm wondering why, because we did talk about the knight taking on e4. I guess the d5 pawn is something that you get worried about, even if it's protected for now. It's like, oh, that's an isolated pawn. Nobody likes isolated pawns, right, Anna? Does anybody really like them?
I think no, but after knight e4, there was also a possibility to play knight f5 and to bring the knight to d4. So maybe this was also not what Hoifan liked and wanted to allow. But look at this, bishop b6 played, and now rook fb8. I believe rook fb8 was a really cool move, attacking the bishop. And now knight c8 is an awesome possibility, I think.
Yo, I like knight c8 for sure. Oh, and there's potentially queen a7 check, because if the bishop goes to a5...
Yeah, right.
Oh.
Important one. And if the bishop retreats to e3 or f2, we can take the pawn on b4, which is a bit unpleasant. Maybe not only a bit, but it's really unpleasant. Bishop a5 played.
So she's giving up the exchange, which I think is a very good practical decision, because the end of the line should go knight takes a4. And this is a really good example of when rooks are not that much better than minor pieces, because what are these rooks doing on a8 and b8? I think black is slightly better perhaps, but not that much better, because the rooks aren't doing too much. And I'm looking at the d6 pawn. I've mentioned it so many times now, Anna. I do not like this pawn on d6. I have kind of some trauma from my games in these variations where the d6 pawn is forever a problem.
Yeah, white definitely has a good compensation. I wasn't sure about knight b6 because the knight on c8 was quite passive, and it was just it defended the pawn, so maybe it was better to keep this knight on c8, which was also blocking the rook on b8 from coming to e8 or f8. Anyway, the knights are traded.
And Ifan has 8 seconds left.
8 seconds, 7.
I usually forget to look at the clock. What about b pawn running? Can I go b5, b6? Is white just threatening to push this pawn? Not anymore.
Queen d7. No, Sarah doesn't want to allow that.
She knew what I was trying to do.
And she's trying to play for a win. She could play queen d7, repeating the moves, but he didn't want that.
No, and now her bishop is finally on h6, and 2 seconds left for Ifan. She plays b5. This actually has been a very well-played game at this point. Bishop b4 hitting d6. I think, okay, queen d7, now b6. Who's better? I can't even tell. Okay, it's protected past pawn. Rook to b1, rook c1. I don't know which square you want to go to.
Knight e5, sometimes maybe this tactical shot. Not immediately. Oh, she lost. No, she lost some time. The position was real and clear in the end, and perhaps black was a bit better, but just a little bit. But Yifan lost some time, and it's really a pity.
Yeah, that certainly is unfortunate there to conclude the game like that. And we move on to the second game where Sarah has the white pieces and the lead. We talked about how Sarah is the underdog based on ratings, but she's really been amazing throughout the WSEC. She's made it to 3 semifinals. She's lost all 3 of the semifinal matchups against higher-rated players, and she's also lost the third-place matches that she's played in. But just to get there is a really big accomplishment, and she's shown tremendous chess throughout.
Yeah, sure. She's shown great chess. She's playing really well. She sees like small tricks very quickly, and it's really great. I lost the match to Sarah myself, so I know how strong Sarah is. And but she may feel some psychological pressure that she already lost two previous times the matches for the third place. I hope that she is not thinking too much about that right at the moment, because you may really feel bad about that.
Yeah, you should try to forget your previous matches and just focus on the one here. But as we know, it is difficult sometimes to just strictly focus on the chess. And speaking of the chess, this opening played many, many, many times where it looks like this pawn on c5 at first could have been captured, but now if you do that, black will trade queens on c3 and then recapture this pawn on c5. So there may be two attackers, and for some of our less experienced viewers, there are currently two, but after you take on c5, queen takes c3 removes one of them, and then after knight takes c5, you look at these sort of weak pawns on the queen side for white. Not actually the end of the world, it's still a very interesting battle, but I don't think white wants to go for this variation.
No, I didn't take on c5. They prefer to play bishop e2 and castling, while black played b6, protecting the pawn on c5 even more and developing the bishop to b7. And this is the move c4. This is the move I wanted to speak about, when it's really good for black to play c4, when it's not good. I think in this position it's quite okay. If after b3 you have b5, after a4 you have a6, so you keep this chain, and it looks good for black.
I agree, because sometimes you've kind of committed to it and the dark squares become a little bit more vulnerable. The bishop on b7 gets stuck behind a wall of pawns. But now after knight e5, I guess Sarah's trying to open up some files for her rooks. Just black has more space on the queen side, and with that, when you have more space, or sorry, I should say with the side with less space, sometimes wants to trade pieces to open up the remaining squares for her pieces. And here after knight takes e5, d takes e5, is the d5 pawn really going to be that big of a weakness? And if it is, then you probably should not take this knight on e5, and that's why she's spending time here. So Anna, would you take the knight on e5, or would you protect your knight on d? Oh, question answered, but what would you have done?
I think I wouldn't have taken, but Hou-Yifan did take. I think both of the possibilities were quite good to take, or to play something like knight b6 or queen d6. Anyway, Hou-Yifan decided to take. Now she's threatening to take another pawn on a3, so white has to do something against that. Now the question is if they play b4 or not.
Ooh, to close down, or try to close down the queen side. Of course, black can try for a5 at some point to open up the rook on a8. I'm still looking at this e5 pawn. That's the pawn that's bothering me. I feel like somehow that's going to be weak, because if I put a rook on e8, you have to play f4 to defend it. But then when you play f4, your e3 pawn through the e5 pawn will be a target, right?
Yes, black may think about something like playing f6, opening the file and putting more pressure on the e3 pawn. After rook e8, f4.
Right. And that's why I think Sarah is now thinking again, trying to figure out, wait, now a3 pawn is under attack. I see the pressure it's about to build on the e5 pawn. And the essential question is, rook a to e8 and after f4 to play f6, is that a good decision for Yifan, or is that liquidating a little too much for her taste? I'm not sure the consequence here. Although, actually, I'm going to answer my own question. I hope you don't mind, Anna. Rook e8, f4, f6, there may be some kind of like bishop h5 move to kick the rook off of e8 and thus protecting this pawn on e3.
I think bishop h5 is a very important move. If not about bishop h5, things would go really well for black. But after bishop h5, now black is not attacking the e3 pawn so much. So now you can take on f6, and after rook f6, I believe, rook f6 will be played. No?
How do you decide? How do you decide between the queen trade being offered or just playing rook takes f6? Your instinct was rook f6 here.
Rook f6, I somehow liked it more than with the idea of rook e6. Sometimes d4 is an interesting sacrifice, not here, of course. But let's say after rook e6, rook e1, if d4, now we still can't play it. We still can't play it. Yes. D4, rook d4.
D4 is interesting to me. I know you say you can't play it, but one thing you should know anytime I do commentary, these are not our pieces, okay? We can play d4. There's no consequences for us. And d4 is a really interesting move, just trying to open up the position. The bishop on b7 gets to be very strong. I think she might play d4.
D4, no, she didn't play.
No.
She went for bishop c6, but D4 was a good try.
And now D4 is not happening because there's a rook on D4, and that makes it a little difficult to play it for black. Try to dislodge that rook. There's no way. And that's the problem, I think, that we're now seeing with playing C4. At the time, it was a good move, and it was definitely the right decision. But as the game continues, if white is able to put her pieces on dark squares, note that you can't possibly kick this rook off D4, the queen on C3. It's a bishop on C6 that is looking more like a pawn for the moment, which is why D4 was especially enticing, because then it would look like a real bishop again.
As bishop g4 was played, but to me, I thought about the move like queen d2 followed by the idea of e4, because there was the pin over the d file, so I also had this idea in mind. Bishop g4, rook e4. Will Sarah continue chasing the rook by playing bishop f3?
She can. She can also play bishop f5 if she wants to force the rook off the board, because the rook no longer has a choice but to capture on d4 there. Bishop f3 looks more natural, though. I'm sort of thinking for checkmate. Like, can I get bishop f5, retreat my bishop, go for the h7 square? No, the answer is no, I can't. So I'm going to take it back. And Ifan brings her rook back to e6. Who's better here? Or is it just a level position? I don't like talking in terms of results, but I'm just wondering, which side would you rather play with here?
I think it's easier to play with white. But I believe the position is more or less level. And once again, Sarah doesn't repeat the moves, so she's really in a fighting mood, what is, of course, great. She didn't play bishop g4. She played queen d2. And now be careful, because my idea with e4 may work.
Ooh. Yeah, because the pawn was pinned to the rook on d8, so she moves over. That's the problem with this position, is white is going after the d5 pawn, black is going after the e3 pawn, and they're trading off attacks. Queen h4 forces king g1, and are we going to see queen e7? Okay, question answered. Is this going to be the 3-move repetition in this way?
Maybe this time it can be, because if white takes the d5 pawn, then black takes the e3 pawn, and it's still very equal. So I think it was like a logical outcome of the game.
You don't see repetitions like that very often, with like a queen h4 check, king back to g1, queen all the way back. It didn't really seem like, I mean, the pawn on e3 was under attack, but it's not the typical, like, you absolutely must make this move, otherwise you lose the game. Is an interesting moment for that repetition, but as you said, very logical conclusion. And now Sarah keeps her 1-point lead. I think she's playing very impressively in the opening 2 games.
Yeah, she's playing very well, and we see that Hui Fan didn't repeat the same line. She didn't go for Royal Opus. She played third move bishop c4, which is the Italian game, or Giocho Piano, as some people say it. I know that Hui Fan has a lot of experience in this line, so it will be interesting to see with which setup she will come up, because there are so many of them. So many of possibilities to develop the pieces, and so many little nuances which you don't understand immediately, but if you really feel the position well, you later on play it better. So rook e1 is played. Now the question is if black will castle, or sometimes there are ideas of playing h6 g5. These are the modern ideas. I think they appeared just a few years ago. Before, black always went for a castle and bishop e6 or something like that. But we see h6, so will we see g5? Robert?
I'm hoping so. You were saying it, and I was like, I've seen positions like this with g5. I've played them myself, but usually I want my opponent's pawn, because I'm playing this from the black side, my opponent's pawn to be on h3, because when I play g5, then I can play g4 to rip open the king side. So this pawn move to h3, which is so thematic in the Italian game, it can backfire if it allows black, who has not castled, to play g5, g4. So I think that Sarah will eventually castle. Oh, she starts at knight e7. Maybe she's saying, hey, I'm going to play a little bit more aggressively. And as you said, Anna, it is a more modern approach to the position. I think that the earlier players would kind of roll in their graves seeing these g5 moves. It's sort of a romantic style to some extent, but at the same time, it's against many of the principles of chess.
Yeah, right. Chess is changing. Also, the computers showed some new ideas, and players started to apply them in their own games. So Sarah played knight e7. It's also a typical regrouping of the knight in this kind of the positions. The knight is coming to g6, and after that, black can play c6 and d5. So that's why Sarah thinks the knight on g6 is more useful than the knight on c6.
Yeah, the knight on c6 sort of blocks black's play, as you were mentioning, with c6 as being an idea, and the knight on g6 can't really be kicked out very easily. And knight is certainly needed to protect e5. Neither side wants to break the tension. Black does not want to take on d4 and give white the strong pawns in the center, two pawns there healthily, and white doesn't really want to take on e5 and open up his bishop on a7, making it feel like a better piece. So this kind of a d4 e5 situation is very common in the Italian, as it is in the Spanish, right? It just you kind of leave it there for a while.
Yes, I think that at the moment white is slightly better because we see these pawns on e4 and d4 already occupying the center. So if okay, bishop c2 was played, this is with the idea to play knight f1, knight g3, and we protect the e4 pawn, because if you played knight f1 immediately on the previous move, black would have taken on d4 and also take the pawn on e4. So we really needed bishop c2 for that. And now knight f1 is like a logical follow-up.
And
to me.
Yeah, no, it is very logical. I was wondering why she hasn't played it. She is up quite a bit of time thus far, so she can consider other options. Maybe she should play a5 and then bring the knight to c4. There's sometimes you bring the knight out there. I would play knight f1. That's certainly the move that I first looked at. And from black's point of view, you often want to play knight f4, and even if you don't have a real attack, you can try to play knight f6 to h5, or maybe you're playing knight h5 for black anyway to bring this knight on f6 to f4 and then bring the queen to f6. You would like to start kind of building up some pressure on the king side, and hey, there's knight h5. I think I feel good about this now. I'm feeling very confident about my ability to predict a move when I get one right.
Yes, it's that was good. Knight h5. It's a typical like setup for black. Knight h5, queen f6, knight f4. Sometimes even knight gf4, not knight 8 f4, because after knight gf4 there is a possibility to play queen g6. So let's see how Ifan will react to that. Bishop e3 was played. Queen f6 will be played too, I believe. No, knight f4 immediately.
I liked queen f6 though. And she's okay. She just changed the move order, but you had a good point on about the knight on g6 being on f4. The knight on h5 stops knight g3. So because Sarah moved her knight from h5 away, then Yifan was able to finish her development or her plan to put the knight on g3, and now white's center is so well protected by the knights on f3 and g3. There's no real attack that I can see because white has too many pieces around her king, and that's why knight h4 was chosen. But now at the end of this, white's queen will just go to f3 here, and I don't see any possibility of attack. I think white's just strategically much better here.
To me, it looks the same. Just at the very moment, I think white has to be careful with some sacrifices like knight g2, king g2, bishop h3, and then if the bishop comes to g4 and f3, so that there are some mating ideas, though I believe it's too slow. So not really.
You're going all in for the attack. I like the way you're thinking about this. Just like, let's go g5, g4, bishop takes h3, and just rip everything open. I'm here for that. I don't think it's going to happen, though.
But you said that it's not our pieces, we may sacrifice them, so I started to feel more free about that.
I think, I'm glad you feel free to suggest any move possible. That's what we should be doing, but now I'm sort of regretting it because I feel like you're going to be just sacrificing all the pieces and be like, what did I do to I'm such a, you're Miss Solid, right? You're supposed to be the strategic player, not the crazy sacrificial player.
I'm supposed to be a balanced player, so something in between, Not like very, very solid, but not also the one who is coming with some crazy sacrifices.
Well, here we see knight f5, not a sacrifice, but preventing black sacrifices. And a very important question is bishop takes f5, because some players say, wait, I'm giving white double pawns, so that has to be a good thing. And to my eyes, it looks really good for black here. But how good is it really? Like, is the bishop going to be better than the knight, or is the knight going to be better than the bishop?
The knight on f4 really looks like a nice piece. It's attacking, while the bishop on c2 is a bit passive. So I believe black has a good position here. Queen g5. What out? Mate is coming.
Don't hang the checkmate. And I think... So she plays g3. That's a move that I'm typically nervous to make because the h3 pawn is hanging. But maybe that knight gets trapped somehow.
King h2, queen h5, and g4.
Yeah, nice. Just g4, hitting the queen and opening the rook to the knight. That's still scary, though. I don't really like opening my king up so much. I guess it is a piece for just 2 pawns, so it's worth it. But I don't know. It's funny. I have this tendency to sacrifice pieces we're talking about, but then there are moments where I'm like, oh, no, I wouldn't do that. That's too weakening. So I need to make up my mind.
But on the other hand, if you don't play g3, you really don't like this knight on f4, so you want to get rid of it as quickly as possible. And if g3 works, why not to play it?
And Yifan is kicking Sarah's pieces back. The queen now has to go back to e7. The knight just had to retreat to h5. And the pawn on e5, it sticks out. It's one that I would like to put more pressure on. And I think a very essential question that some people would say is like, wait, if my pawn e5 is under attack, can I play f6 to protect it? The answer is you can, but not when your knight is on h5, and even if the knight was able to get back somewhere into the game, the bishop would have the e6 square if this pawn were not on f7. So don't push that pawn. It's a move that you can never take back, any sort of pawn move, and it would help the light squared bishop.
Well, if the knight was on d5, let's imagine, and the pawn was on h7, I think you can play f6 because you don't really weaken your light squares too much. But with the pawn on h6 and with the knight especially on h5, it's not a great idea.
That's why Sarah brought it back to f6 towards the center, put a rook on d5, now queen on d7. I think rook d2 is a very clear threat, and white cannot afford that move to come with a tempo. So queen f3 was played to get the queen out of dodge, and if rook to d2, you can even drop your rook back to e2, but that actually brings up a very good question, Anna. Which pieces, for both sides, what trades would white want to see and what trades would black want to see?
Oh, that's not so easy. I believe that black rooks are quite well played and they have the control over the d-file, so I wouldn't trade black rooks. e4, what was that? Take rook e4, queen e4.
I think this was a big misjudgment because I think she did this to trade the e5 pawn for the f5 pawn, but isn't white just a queen e8 check and then rook e7 at the end here? Like, just here and rook e7 and b7 and f7 are both problems.
It looks like a very pleasant endgame for white, and while black didn't really have problems, I think that e4 wasn't really necessary.
Yeah, I agree with you. And one thing I always point out about rook end games, if it's only 1 pawn deficit, if you're able to trade off pawns on one side of the board, 3 on 2 on the king side will not be winning. The issue is black is completely tied down here. This rook on b5 needed to defend b7, and you cannot afford to trade rooks, so a move like c5 would be met by rook takes c5, forcing the rooks off. And this should be winning for white with proper play, but with minimal time on the clock, it's not so easy to convert.
Of course, yeah, the rook on b5 is like really the big problem, but it's not so easy for white to make progress. I think now Ifan
King h5.
tried. Okay, f4.
I was looking at king h5 just to surround that g5 pawn.
I think now white is winning because c5 cannot be played as there was rook h5. Now c5 will be 6. Rook
yeah,
b6,
nice. We both said at the same time. So I think you said slightly first, so I'll give you credit on that find. And after this game concludes, it will be the final game of the 5-minute plus 1. In fact, resignation has happened. Let's go back to that moment because it's super instructive as white was up a pawn. And I was mentioning earlier, with rooks on the board, just a single pawn often isn't quite enough. And at that moment, in fact, actually before she played f5, she could have played rook h5 instead. doing the same thing, trying to trade off the rooks and win the king and pawn endgame. She played f5, which is also a very good move. The rook still cannot move, as rook h7 check would pick up the b7 pawn, so she played c5. And if not for rook b6, Anna, I'm not really sure white's winning this game. So rook b6 was a very necessary move.
Maybe if there was no rook b6, white shouldn't have played f5 so quickly, and I believe there was some other way to try, maybe to play rook d6, king e7, or rook g6, something like that, and then transfer the rook to g5. But if there is rook b6, of course you can play f5, just trying to move your pawn closer, and that's it. And we saw that the last game was aborted, so it was the last game in 5+1 portion. If I am correct.
You're definitely correct. We will go into the 3+1 segment with a tied match thus far. And before we take a break, I just want to point out that this move rook b6 is hard to see when there's a pawn on c6. So like just visualizing that with 15 seconds on your clock is really an impressive moment for Yifan to find. And so she does it. She ends up winning quite quickly because Sara resigns as the winning king and pawn in the game. The black king is stuck against the f pawn. The white king is going to c7 to win the b7 pawn. You use it as a decoy. So Anna, it's time for a break. I'm going to grab some water, stretch my legs, all that good stuff. And when we return, everybody, we will come back with quicker time control. So you will not want to miss this action. Stay tuned, everybody. Hello, everybody. We are back with more Women's Speeches Championship coverage. Just a reminder to everybody of what the leaderboard looked like heading into this match. Anna Ushanina has guaranteed her spot in the super final as she is one tiebreak point ahead of Valentina Gunina. And Valentina Gunina will be rooting very heavily against Alexandra Kostenyuk later today because if Alexandra wins, she leapfrogs Valentina Gunina and Anna into first place. Otherwise, it will be Ushanina Gunina in the super final. Whew, fun stuff ahead.
Yes, true. It will be a very exciting match between Kostenyuk and Hampi Konero. But for the moment, we are covering the match between Hui Fan and Sarah Hadamal-Shari. The score is tied. It's 1.5 to 1.5. We have seen the amazing technique in the Rook Endgame in the last game shown by Hui Fan, while Sarah won in a nice style the very first game of their match, and soon the games with the time control of 3+1 will start. Looking forward to them.
And here they go. And I would say that the even match, based on the score, is actually very fair because the players have been kind of going back and forth within the games here, and Yifan won a nice one there. She probably wasn't so much better until Sarah went e4. She forced the action, and there are moments in chess where I know my coach was like, Robert, you need to calm down. You don't need to make things happen immediately. Just let the position play itself. Don't force the issue. And sometimes we do that as players, and we regret it.
Yeah, sometimes you have to keep the pressure, and it's really important. But when it's a blitz game, it's really very difficult to calculate all the consequences, all the lines. And I believe Sarah just missed Queen 8 move by Hui Fan. Otherwise, the position would be pretty much equal, I think. Anyway, the new game has started.
What is this with Queen on e7? I need to ask you. I don't know this line.
Me neither. I know the line was a3. But g6, well, g6 is a known move. Bishop g7, queen e7. I think black wants to play e5 perhaps at some moment. That's why she really needed queen e7.
I think I think queen e7, now that I'm reflecting on the positions, that way after d takes e6, there was no forced queen trade. And that's going to be hard to visualize, so I'll go back in time here. That after... If bishop g7 instead of queen e7, there's d takes e6 in some variations, and taking back with the d pawn would allow a queen trade, and black loses the right to castle. Maybe that's an issue. I'm not positive, but I'm just noting that changes the dynamic here. And as we get back to the live position, this move c5, Anna, and just pushing forward, saying, your pawn on d5, it looks good for now, but this is now a Benoni structure. What do you make of this one?
Yes, it's kind of like... It really looks like a Benoni structure, but in Benoni it's known that the bishop on b7 doesn't really do much, so I don't like this setup for black. The bishop on b7 is very passive. Usually you have to place your bishop somewhere on d7 and trying to push b5, or more often they try to put the bishop, black tries to put the bishop on g4 and tries to get rid of this bishop as soon as possible, because black really needs much more space, and trading some of the pieces is in their favor in the structure.
It's true, and right now black doesn't have good control over the center. You stop white's progress, but white is the one with pawns on e4 and d5, and ooh, that knight came into e5 very quickly, trying to hop into d3, and I think knight to b5 is a typical move you see for white, so I think Sarah probably should have played knight b5 before rook to e1. The rook is actually not the happiest as it can be. It's actually quite good on f1 rather than e1.
Yes, because even now, Sarah did play knight b5, but still there is knight d3 and trading at least some pieces. And as I have said, black really needs some space, and trading the knight for this bishop was a good trade, in my opinion. And now, what to do for black? What is the plan? What can be the plan?
I hope that's a rhetorical question, because I was hoping you would answer it. But I do think that for black here, there's several options. One is to even capture this knight on b5. That way your d6 pawn feels a little bit safer. But I wouldn't take there. I don't like the look of a takes b5 and then potentially swinging the rooks back to the a file. And we know that Yifan will think about it, and she may actually do it. I personally would probably play more of a waiting type of move. Maybe queen to d7 to put more pressure on her. Bishop h6 she plays. I guess f4 typically is a move that white has to be worried about playing. And here there's a big problem. Knight takes d5, right?
But she did play f4 and very quickly, was it the blunder?
Oh.
Or she had something in mind? Knight d5 played, and now?
That looks like a blunder to me. The rook is no longer defended on e3, so you can't take the knight back.
True, yes. So, unfortunately, we witnessed the first blunder. Okay, unfortunately for us, because I am, like the person who is rooting for a good play, while I think viewers prefer to see some action, and they really like when there is some blunder, when someone runs out of the time, and something is happening.
Yeah, and hopefully we get a combination of just excellent play with these crazy moments, and that was just a mistake by Sarah, and an understandable one. But I think she's going to have to pay the price of a full point in Ifan's favor in this game. It just seems like such a good position. The dark square bishop unopposed on this diagonal here. The d6 pawn is something that Ifan needs to keep an eye on. So that's the real problem point in her position. But if she's able to take care of that, maybe with just bishop takes b5 to release the pressure. Ooh,
she came up with knight c6, which is a very interesting and a very nice trick, because if white takes on d6 now, then there is knight d4 blocking the d file, and then the knight on d6 will be taken on the next move. That's why Sarah came with an interesting idea of e5. Look at these beautiful rooks on d1 and e1. And the queen on e7 is a bit awkwardly placed, I believe. But maybe black is just on time.
Yeah, the knight.
d6 now?
Wait, queen takes e1. So this is what you get renegade pieces. And here's queen takes e1, we check, and then knight takes b5. But wait a second, this knight on c4 and pawn on d6, Anna, that looks really strong for white. So this is, I think, not a bad position. We saw this in the very first game with an exchange sacrifice by Ifan. Now we see one, it wasn't really by choice, it was by necessity. Who's better here?
I think it was a very, very, very good choice by Sarah, because all her pieces are very active now. She has taken the pawn on a7,
She
now the
blundered,
b6. She blundered bishop before.
I hate to cut you, I'm so sorry, Anna, but I noticed that king h1 is met by rook e1 with, you have to play bishop f1, you lose a piece, and otherwise you have to go king f1 and rook f2 check, and your king has to walk in discoveries or lose the bishop on g2. Ooh.
So she couldn't take on a7 immediately. She had to make some prophylaxis. But strategically speaking, she was playing very well. And this positional exchange sacrifice was really good one, in my opinion.
Yeah, she probably had to go bishop d5 before rook takes a7. And these little move orders really can come back to bite you. And we saw that, unfortunately for Sarah, she made the wrong move order in a position that was getting better for her. She didn't have the better position, but it was improving compared to her earlier situation. And now into game 5 here, Anna, we see that it's another Italian.
Yes, it's another Italian, and for me it will be interesting who will deviate first, and it was black. Because if black continued the same line, it's not clear what Ifan has prepared. Because I believe that in the previous game in this line, black was really doing fine. So now a very typical move, which may happen, f5. f5 sacrifices the knight, so that if white takes on g4, then f takes g4, followed by g3 and queen h4. Could be dangerous, but Sarah started with knight h6, and now the same idea of f5.
Oh my gosh, I like that. I wish she played f5 first. Going for the sacrifices, I'm definitely here for that. But we saw the calmer knight h6 and then f5, and these lines, I remember seeing a game by Levon Aronian many years ago. If you take on h6, some people think, wait, aren't I ruining black's pawn structure in front of the king, making the king weaker? You're actually helping black's attack, because opening up the g file will be very useful. For example, queen f6 can go to g7 if that pawn has to capture on h6, and the g2 pawn at the end of the line here will be in some trouble.
Yes, therefore I don't think white will take on h6, because if you take on h6, you really have to open the position, and so that you really take advantage of the exposed king. But if you can't do it, you can't really play d4 immediately, then it's better not to take it, because you may appear very quickly under the attack. But bishop h6 was played, so let's see how Ifan will play this position. And now d4, or how will she try to open it? Or maybe she will just play something like knight g3. Knight g3, bishop h3. So
Ooh.
it's bishop h3 is kind of a threat in this position.
So maybe bishop d5 and then bring the bishop to e4, something like that. Is that possible?
Bishop d5 looks nice. She plays it.
Okay. I love it when the players justify our suggestions. Like, oh, what about this move? Oh, well, it's played, so we don't have to ask the question any longer.
Yes. That also proves that we think in the same direction and we have some solidarity with it.
I am appreciative when the players are feeling like they should be cooperative with us. It's very helpful for sure. And, well, what do you make of this? Because I'm looking at the open king side, and that makes me want to take black's position from a tactical point of view. From a strategic point of view, I like white's position because the pawn structure is healthier. You have this nice bishop on d5. It feels like you can create some progress on the queen side with eventual b4. And, whoa, giving up the b7 pawn. What's going on here?
I don't know. Rook b8, bishop e4, bishop takes e4. If rook takes e4, black takes on b2. So d takes e4. Maybe there is some sacrifice on f3. I don't know. Rook takes f3, g takes f3, knight g6.
I'm gonna put that on the board.
It is the line.
Wow, I love that. The knight's coming into f4, even to h4. The queen comes to 8. Oh my gosh, that looks great. That looks really tempting.
Will we see this in the board? Rook b8 was played, bishop e4. What's coming next?
I think we're going to see it. Because bishop takes e4, you make a good point. Rook takes e4, there's... Oh.
No, she didn't go for that. Why not?
Because they're not our pieces. It's easy for us to say. Although I think that was actually really objectively a great decision to do that. Instead, she plays knight g6. She still has very good compensation here. As that knight is trying to come to f4. It just doesn't seem quite as clear. Right? That other line, the white king was broken open. The pawn structure was compromised. Here it's like, okay, there's compensation, but then it's a vague compensation rather than a very concrete form of it.
Okay, there is some compensation, but what to do for white? I finally decided to trade the bishops, and now she played rook d2, not allowing rook takes f3, and also it's a prophylaxis against knight f4, so I think it's a good move. Knight f4 played anyway.
One issue I'm seeing here on is like, if I play queen to g8, I'm actually threatening queen takes g3. So this bishop on a7 is really strong. And I think you'll have to play d4 for white, which is probably something you want to do regardless. But I'm trying to, I don't know, I want to get my rook on g7. Like rook b8 to g7 would be excellent. Just go for an attack.
Queen g8 was played, by the way, and d4 was also played. So everything is going well. Now the rook on f5 is not hanging because there is still the weight on g2. But there is no queen g3 anymore.
There isn't, that's right. So you took away black's immediate threat of queen takes g3, and I should have said, which I'm glad you point out, that g2 is hanging beyond the knight on g3. So the knight can't take what looks like a rook that's hanging because g2 is checkmate. So knight h4 played, and these knights are not that great, I would say, for white on h4 and g3. There's something about them that looks very suspicious.
Yes, indeed. Rook g5 was played, so now white has to be careful with all the sacrifices on g3. Also, e3 is in the air because after f takes e3, we may take on h3. The line e3, f takes e3, knight h3, and then take on g3. May look unpleasant for white. But the thing I didn't look for black is that now this bishop on a7 is blocked. So
wait, but this decision, knight takes e4, rook takes g2 check, this looks scary. Whoa.
Rook g5.
Wait, she's trying to go. Wait,
but queen g5, queen g4.
I think she forgot about queen g4.
Oh, why did she do that?
She forgot about queen g4. I think in her calculations, she was thinking that her queen was going to infiltrate and the knight on h4 was hanging. I really think she just forgot. And now queen d5 check. We're getting a repetition. f3 played. The knight on f4.
The knight is hanging.
Rook g1 now. So who's the one attacking? It looks like white.
Queen g8 mate was the threat.
Oh, queen g8 doesn't work. It doesn't work.
It doesn't work now, but with the pawn on f3 it worked.
It's one of those things where you forget the difference between the pawn on f3 and pawn on f4. So take on f3 and then take on f4 would probably what I would have done. Oh, this is looking not good.
C5.
2 seconds. 1 second. Oh my gosh, it scares me. Knight takes h6. Now rook g8 is checkmate, and you can't stop it.
Yeah, she did it. A nice game, really nice game by both players. They had so many creative ideas, and I really like the way they played. I think Black was attacking in a very creative way and a very interesting one, but Sarah blundered in the very end. Otherwise, the exchange sacrifice was working, I think.
Yeah, she was down under 20 seconds. Both players were, and that's when mistakes really happen. It was a very interesting game to that point. Some sacrificial ideas, and unfortunately for Sarah, in the time trouble, she was not able to score any points there. Now she gets the white pieces. We have a Rogozin, which to my eyes always like a little strange. There's a knight on c6 in front of a pawn on c7, but I know it's standard opening theory. So, Anna, what do you make of the Rogozin? Solid, or I don't know. What are your thoughts?
It's very solid. I don't play it, but it's very solid. So e3, white has an easy plan, just developing the pieces, and then after castling, the pawn on d5 will be hanging. So in this type of the structure, the knight shouldn't be placed on c6. It's better if black has the pawn on c6. So basically, everything like what black needs to do, they have to regroup all the pieces, moving back the bishop to f8, then moving the knight to e7, perhaps, then playing c6 and getting this normal type of the structure.
Yeah, it's just kind of awkward with this knight on c6, and this. If the knight moves away from c3, the knight on c6 can't move so easily with the pawn on c7 behind it. So bishop g4 is going right after this knight on f3, and what do you do here? Knight to d2, you can just try to regroup. Feels like you're moving in the wrong direction, but eventually you can probably try to play knight to b3 and into c5. So knight d2, I guess, would be my choice. Are there any... Oh,
knight e5.
Aha, the bishop.
Nice trick. The knight on e5 can't be captured. Okay, knight e5 can be played, but after d takes e5, black can't go queen e5 because the bishop on g4 will be hanging. Nice idea.
I think
Sarah.
It's a nice tactic, but I think black is happy to take on e5 and just play like queen e6 or something, and then you have this nice c and d5 pawn situation. The e5 pawn is weak. Black has the bishop pair. I don't fully buy it. I think you can take it.
After queen e6, there was a little problem, perhaps with knight b5. I'm not sure it worked, but it looked a bit unpleasant for black.
Fair.
So maybe that's why Ifan decided to go queen g5, protecting the bishop this way. What about h4 now? h4. Queen h5 is the only move.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And then now white can't really castle anymore. That's the drawback of pushing the pawn up there. As once black says, all right, I see what you're trying to do. You're trying to force my queen away from the bishop. I'll just stay on h5. And then castling is not going to be so easy for white by overextending the king side.
I think we can still castle because after castling queen takes h4, there is the move of f3. But black, of course, doesn't have to take immediately the pawn on h4. They can take it later. And f4 g3. f4 g3. Oh, this is a bit dangerous for white, because I believe that if black opens the position, if they manages to play d4 in the right moment, the king will be really exposed.
I think she's playing this due to the match score rather than her actually believing in it, because this sort of line, as you're saying, look at all the light squares around the king. Black is the only one with a dark squared bishop, so if this bishop gets to c5 and puts pressure on e3, that's going to be a problem for white as well. So I'm not even sure what move you play in this position for Sarah. It's looking very shaky.
Yes, very, very, especially, for example, if white castles now, after castling there, I think there is bishop c5 attacking the pawn on e3, and if white defends by playing something like, if they defend by playing something like rook e1, then there is d4, and it's very, very scary. Yeah. h3 was played.
Everything's opening up. h3? Now let's go back to the... Oh, gosh. So you can't take on h3, is her claim, because you're walking into a pin. That's probably not something that you should do there. And bishop f3, is going to be met by Rook H.
Rook H2.
Ooh, I don't like that. Ooh, whoa. Bishop C5. So King F2 actually attacks this bishop while protecting the pawn on E3. So King F2 looks like a scary move to play, but it has a clear purpose. Right,
So some line like King F2, D4, H takes G4, Queen takes G4. I don't know what's happening.
But you are in the mindset of sacrificing other people's pieces. I like it. I like it. I've influenced you, probably for the worse, but at least I've made an impact in your life. That's what I feel like right now.
True. I don't think it's an interesting line.
You know, it is.
I will not like it.
It definitely is. D4, you have to be sure about it, and Yifan, I guess, wasn't so sure about it, so she dropped... Wait, okay, so Bishop F5. You know what I'd play here? I'd play Queen to D1. Oh, I liked Queen D1. I would have tried to trade the queens off in the most solid of styles, because I don't like this king on F2.
Yeah, if white could trade the queens, it would be on their favor, I believe. But Sarah preferred to play another move. I think she's trying to make the position more complicated, to keep more chance on the board, because she really needs to win the game, as she's losing in the match at the moment.
The problem, though, is that sometimes you play for a win, but you're really just playing for a loss, right? You're like just going all in, and actually sometimes the very calm, like queen trade, is the most promising situation. So, whoa, she stole a pawn in A5. Did Sarah. Now the queen came to G6, and Rook A8, just trying to go after this A3 pawn. D4 is coming. I don't know what to make of. This is wild. This position's crazy.
D4, finally D4 was played. I wanted this move to be played like 10 moves ago.
Better late than never, right?
I think Black has a very good compensation for the sacrifice pawn. Moreover, the sacrifice pawn was the A pawn, which isn't that much important at this position when the queens are on the board.
Although now it's 2 pawns.
But it's already 2 pawns.
Yeah, and knight d6 is a good move. Rook takes d5.
Rook takes d5. Bishop e7, or where to move the bishop? Bishop c7. Okay, a little trick.
She wants to go for bishop b6, so don't blunder.
She did blunder. Okay.
Oh my gosh, I just said don't blunder, and then...
Oh, yes.
We'll bring up that position one more time, because at the final moment there, if instead of rook c3, she just brought her king to g2, walked out of the pin, but with 2 seconds on her clock, it was hard to play. But king g2 would have left white with an advantage up a couple pawns.
It was a very nice play by Sarah. She actually outplayed Hou Yifan in the middle game with all these maneuvers. She won 2 pawns, but then the blunder in the end decided the game.
Tough when you're playing against Yifan, who, of course, is the highest rated female player on the planet, and then you have good positions, and under the duress of just 2 seconds on your clock, you make a blunder that you wouldn't make if you even had 3 more seconds, right? Just give a little bit more time to Sarah there. She's able to avoid that. And right now, down 3 points as we have 7 minutes and 35 seconds remaining in the 3-minute time segment. She needs to win, and she kind of needs to do it now, because we're getting to a point where she needs to stay within 2 to 3 games, I would say, just to have a chance in the bullet.
Yes, right. It's the 3-point difference, and it's... maybe it's a crucial game, this one, because if Hou Yifan wins this one, then it's pretty much likely the match is decided. But if Sarah wins, then everything is still going on.
And Sarah is quite a good bullet player. She's very dangerous in the time control. And Yifan actually lost to Humpy Kaneru on Friday due to the results in the bullet. And that was not expected, because Humpy's not so frequent of an online player, but showed good speed and an ability to beat both Valentina Gunina and then Hou Yifan. And so, upsets do happen, even though, of course, in classical chess, Humpy Kaneru is certainly one of the best for top few. It's just in online time controls, things are different. Mouse speed is way more important. Pre-moving, foreign concept to many. And, well, Anna, I'll let you go back into this position here, and I'll stop talking about it.
Yeah, it was a very fascinating match between Hou Yifan and Humpy Kaneru, of course. And this is the position, and we see that I somehow feel Hoi Fan is trying to play very, very solid. She's trying to trade the pieces. She's trying to control the position, not making it very sharp, while Sarah is trying to make it more complicated by playing knight f4. Once again, maybe objectively it's not good, but Sarah has no choice. She has to try to complicate the matters and to do something on the board. She really needs that.
I think this pawn e5 is just lost. That's the sad part here. Right, after e takes d5, rook takes e5 is coming next.
Doesn't look good, unfortunately. Rook takes e5, so is there any compensation? Perhaps not so much. The rook just retreats to e3 or e1.
I like having the semi-open f-file. It looks like a French, which I don't like the French defense at all, for those of you who've watched me talk about that before, but it's a French where you're down a pawn, so it's kind of like the worst possible French, and that's saying a lot.
Okay, Sarah created a threat. Knight h3. Knight h3 is the threat now, so if something like d4, knight h3 will be played.
Okay, so let's be careful with this. Let's move our queen to d2, I guess. Just bring the queen up to protect this pawn on f2.
Yes, queen d2, followed by rook e1.
Yeah, maybe h5, h4, though, is an idea for black. I think h5. Just try to push forward on the king side over here.
Will it be played?
There's
h5.
Also knight e5 to g6 to h4. I know I just made 3 moves in a row, so Anna, I hope you don't mind, but it feels like it's a legitimate plan. It's just trying to reroute this knight over to the king side and go for an attack.
Instead, Sarah is regrouping her rook. She's trying to put her rook on e8, where, of course, it's placed much better than on a7.
Wait. What's your problem with the rook on a7? That looked like a very nice square.
It was a lovely rook on a7, but I prefer it to be placed on e8.
Yeah.
Like Sarah does.
It's probably the correct decision to regroup that rook. And she puts down c8. So she's trying to stop c4, I guess. And the rook on c6 protects e6. And then maybe it can go to b6. So an interesting regrouping, one that I wasn't expecting.
Will Sarah play h5 after all? For example, now h5.
Now black may have to be worried about queen c2 and queen h7 check.
Queen c2.
Actually, queen h7 doesn't threaten anything, does it? Like, can I just go king f7, king e7, run my king away?
Sarah thinks the same. She shouldn't care about queen h7. So let's see if it's dangerous. The dangerous point may be that there is some rook f3 idea, pinning the knight and the queen and everything over the file. And if you bring the king to e7, the king will not feel safe on e7.
Yeah, I was pretending.
Not so much.
And also knight h5 is a threat, right? Just to take advantage of this pin knight on f4. Now this can't be good.
I think it just looks too bad for black at the moment. Yeah, just king f1 and then queen h7 followed by knight h5 or knight f5 or bishop f5. I don't know what's the best. Or knight h5 immediately.
Yeah, this is unpleasant.
Queen h7 and rook f4. Yeah, it's game over.
Rook f4. I was like a queen takes g7 check. I was like, oh, that looks like a free pawn. But what you suggested of winning a queen is way better.
Pity, yeah, after, like, with this score, we can almost be sure that Hoi Fan will win this match.
I think that if Sarah wins this game, she has a very, 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 very slim chance. If she doesn't win this game, then she doesn't have a chance.
And it's the last game in 3+1 portion, so this game will decide basically everything. Once again, we see Rogozin, but a little bit different line, not with queen a4, as which happened in the previous game, but with queen b3, c5. It's still one of the theoretical lines.
And now we see some trades here, which can allow more trades. You can take on d4, take on c4, trade all these pawns, but white tends to claim that the queen on c3 is well positioned compared to the queen on f6. It kind of looks like a mirror image of each other. But the action often takes place on the queen side rather than on the king side in this opening. Would you take on c5?
I think many pieces will be traded in this game, and very likely it will end in a draw. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe not.
It's possible that you're wrong. I'm not saying that you will be. I'm just noting that it is within the realm of possibility. And I don't like this situation for Sarah because now you're in a positional battle. You're down 4 points in the match. You're going to be left with an isolated pawn after d takes c4. It feels like by kind of pawn structure, black is better, but by piece activity, white is better because the bishop on c4 is clearly better than the bishops that's now on d7. And so you could play d5 and trade pieces, but that's not what Sarah wants. She's trying to play for a win, so d5 would not be the way to do so.
The only problem is that when you are playing with the isolated pawn, you really need more minor pieces on the boards to create, to pose more problems, because when you have only two, it's really very difficult. And also we see that black's position is a bit cramped, but when, once again, you have only two pieces, it's very easy to develop them, the knight on c6, bishop on d7. And one more piece was traded, queen e7, so I believe it's quite a comfortable position to play with black. I mean, in terms you are okay with the draw. Just placing the bishop on c6 on the next move, then rook d8, rook c8. I still believe the game will end in a draw.
I am inclined to agree with you. I just think that in these positions, there are not enough weaknesses, and that's what you often need to start trying to exploit. Queen b4 was played. Not enough trades have already happened, so we need a queen trade. And where are you going to attack from? Black's pawn structure is very safe and sound, but by playing queen to b4, I guess the point is you're trying to take over the a file, which black can shut down with a6, and then white will go rook f to d1, and be first to the d file. I don't think this is all that much, though. I really think that the chances here are slight because the bishop sits on c6, Anna, and I don't know how you make progress.
I mean, either the king is coming to e7, and even if you double the rook on the d file, it doesn't help white much because the bishop will be staying on c6 like a rock, controlling everything, controlling the important d7 square. So it's very difficult to make progress with white.
Yeah, I'm just trying to conceptualize, a rock controlling everything as scared. It's like, I'm like, people had like pet rocks as kids. I didn't, but some people did. And I guess that did control their imagination. And I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this. I'll go back to the chess because that's where I don't make so much of a fool out of myself. And rook to d8. Yeah, the pieces are coming off. Black will trade on d4, and then would you just put another rook on d8? Oh, she was on c8.
c8 is also very good. Maybe she wants to play rook c1 followed by rook b1. Sarah doesn't allow that. A very typical idea for black in these types of the position is to play g5 and trying to ask what will you do with all these advanced pawns like on e5 and f4, will you keep them? But e5 came with a also very interesting idea, transferring the rook to b6, and now she's threatening rook, bishop c6, attacking both pawns on g2 and on b4.
That's annoying.
I guess. Moreover, if Sarah plays something like g3, just imagine we play bishop c6. Okay, rook d4, still bishop c6, and now a5. a5 is the idea. Can it be played now? a5?
Yes, certainly can. I guess white isn't really afraid of losing this b pawn. It's a position that black is doing very well in. It's completely fine, but it won't be advantageous because you'll end up with double pawns. And the problem with double pawns is you can't really promote very easily with that dynamic. I sort of still like white's position slightly because of the more advanced pawns, and I'm going to say that and note that it's very possible that black just goes rook a1, rook h1, or g1 and just wins some of the pawns. So I know that could happen, but not anymore.
So what will happen now? Will black finally trade the rooks, or they will go back to a6?
I think white can potentially win this game. I like the advanced pawns.
How will you do that?
Okay, you don't have to ask all the hardest questions at once. I just said it can happen. I don't know how it does happen.
b6 was a good move just in case white goes king d4, so that this pawn will not allow king to go even further to c5. g5, Sarah places her pawns on the right squares, because when you have a light squared bishop, you should place your pawns on the dark squares.
Right.
So she's doing it correctly, and I think one day she will play h5. Just we have to wait for this day to come.
Yeah, today will be that day. It just will be in a little while, and even when that happens, I'm not sure exactly what the consequences are. It seems like black is totally fine. Though she's trying to play h5, take with the king, and then bring her king to g7 and go after the f7 pawn, but that doesn't work either. So I think that you predicted this was going to be a draw about, 6 minutes ago?
I don't know, g6. G6 will be played or not. King h5. I really like what Sarah is doing. She's trying her best. Maybe she will succeed.
But the thing is, if you go g6, you take, and the king goes to e7, and there's nothing that white can do to dislodge this defense, right? It's a rock controlling the e6 square. Did I use the rock right here? No, I didn't.
Yes, the problem is that there are no real targets to attack. Black doesn't really have any weaknesses, so I think they will repeat the moves some way. Bishop c4, okay. What about this pawn endgame? Still a draw?
Still should be a draw, but there could be some trickiness here. Like if king c6, b5 check, and then the white will try to move the king all the way over to f4, but you just keep opposition. And this actually is going to be very instructive for everybody watching, as the concept of opposition here, very important, was king f7, and now do not go like king g7, go king g6, and the king is cut off. White's king is cut off, can't get to f5.
Yeah. White cannot make any progress, so it's a draw. And this was the last game. Last game in 3+1.
It was. They're starting a new game, but that's going to be canceled. So I'm going to go back to that moment just to show one more time that, in this king and pawn game, after move 59, king f4, the only move is king g6. And it's sort of the quote-unquote obvious move, because in king endgames, you do want your king to be more advanced. But if king g7, there's king to g5, and once you get this kind of opposition, the side whose turn it is the side who is unhappy. It's funny, in chess, you typically want it to be your move, but if there's a king on g5 and a king on g7, you're like, no, please, Anna, it's your move. I have the move here. Just take it. It's yours.
One more important moment is that even if it was white to move, it's very important that white has the pawn b2, and they have additional tempest, so they can still play b3 or b4, and once again it will be black to move, and if it's black to move, they have to move the king to f7 or to h7, and both moves are losing. If the king goes to h7, then white king comes to f6. If the king goes to f7, then the king comes to h6. So it's a really unpleasant opposition for black. And very good that white kept the pawn on b2, because these additional tempests are very important in the pawn endgame. So be careful not to make too many pawn moves when it comes to the pawn endgames.
That's a very good point, that when you save up those pawn moves, you can use them at the right moment to force the turn back onto your opponent, and then there could be a zugzwang. So on that note, Anna and I will take a break. When we return, we will have the bullet portion of this match. And reminder to everybody, after this match concludes, we have another match starting right away. It will be the championship match between Humpy Koneru and Alexandra Kosteniuk. So there's a lot of chess ahead. We will be back shortly, everybody.
Yeah, the most important part, 1+1, is starting soon. Stay tuned.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. We are about to get into the bullet portion of this third place matchup between Hu Yifan and Sarah Kadem. And as you can see on the leaderboard, unfortunately for both these players, they were doing great throughout the event, but they needed to make it to the final in order to have a shot at first place. So they are not going to be in the super final. They both have had good events overall, and it looks like in this one, Yifan is she'll make it to the third place in the fourth Grand Prix leg, but unfortunately it will not be enough for her to make it to the super final.
Right, we are waiting for the bullet games to start. Not the most exciting portion to play, but definitely the most exciting one to watch. So I am really looking forward to the games to start.
It sounds like you aren't the biggest fan of playing bullet.
I am not the biggest fan of playing because I'm not good at this. Though I won one match, basically thanks to the bullet games. But in general, I don't like this 1+1 or 1+0 time control so much. Anyway,
good to know. I'm not the biggest bullet player myself. It's very difficult. You have to have really good coordination and mouse speed, and then my wrist starts hurting. I'm just going to start sounding old. So back to the chess here where Yifan has the white pieces. It seems like, I need to put the new timer up for the 1 minute. I'm going to do that now. So you take the lead and talk to us about the game here.
Yes, it was the 4 knights variation after e4, e5. And once again, Hu Yifan is trying to play the lines she has a lot of experience in. And this is a very solid position once again. The ideas are very similar to the Italian game. Transferring the knight to g3, playing c3, rook e1.
Okay.
That's what we will see. And knight f4. Again, we see that Sarah is trying to make the active moves, trying to go for an attack. Let's see if she will be successful this time.
Yeah, it's hard to really come up with an attack here, and Yifan, generally speaking, has done well to put her bishop on e3 and just make it Black's life as difficult as possible if she's playing for a victory. And White has more space, and look at these bishops. Oh gosh, c5 and c4 just doing good work here, and White has to be slightly better.
White is slightly better, and I believe it's a little bit easier to play for White because you are the side who can attack, and Black is the side who will have to defend. For example, after a few moves, they have to take care of the e5 pawn. They will have to keep the knight on g6. So let's see if Sarah takes on f5 again, or if she will decide to play queen f6. But queen f6 is perhaps not possible because of knight h6 check. That was a really awesome trick just one move ago.
Ooh, there's another awesome trick. Knight e7 check instead of knight back to e3. Knight tricks were everywhere. You could have played knight to e7 because after queen takes, there was queen takes f4 and the pawn e5 was pinned. Just having fun. Sorry.
So let's see how d4 now. D4 because the knight on e6 is unprotected. And now, just move the queen.
Oh.
Unpin it.
And then knight takes e5. Caught me off guard there. Which maybe isn't the right move because now rook takes d4 or queen f4 and then queen takes d4 is coming here. And Black is totally fine.
Black is okay. Black is definitely okay. The only question is if they will manage to play for a win or if it's still a draw. I prefer Black's position because Black's rooks are much more active. Rook f5, rook b5 is coming. What will White do?
Rook takes b2. Wasn't that a free pawn a second ago? So
I don't know.
Yeah, now a5 is hanging. She takes that. Now the rooks will come to 7th rank. So g7 and b7 are both problems here. And, okay, now White is definitely not... Ooh. Rook b5 trying to get the rook trade.
So it looks pretty much drawish, but anything can happen when you have only a few seconds.
Anything can happen and anything will happen. That's what I've learned throughout all these commentaries. And
you have seen so many games, I believe.
I have. Too many. Rook c5. I think White's better now. Take on a h5 check. Okay, White might win this game.
Oh, this h5 pawn was missed, I believe.
Yeah. And now white is up a pawn, and it's a 3-on-1 on the king side. So black's going to try to bring her king over and steal the pawn. She does so, but usually the 2 extra pawns on the other flank tell the tale.
So d5, king d5. King will run to help the c pawn to promote, but white is running with their pawn. So okay, rook b6. Rook
Take
b6
on
is
c2.
just enough. Rook h2.
Yeah.
Rook h6.
But take on c2 and then play rook e2 and cut the king off, right?
Perhaps it's still a draw because the f pawn is still too far.
Yeah.
Maybe. Rook h6, rook c2, rook h7, rook e2. Now let's see this technique.
The worst part is that white can play this game forever, and this is the first game of the bullet, and yet almost half the time has gone off the clock.
Oh, f4. I believe that if the rook was on f8, it would be a draw because you would have enough place to play a rook g8, rook f8. But with the rook on f7, rook g7, I think white is winning now.
Yes, white is winning. With the pawn f5, king on f6, certainly. You start pushing this pawn up. King f7, f6. You'll build the bridge at the end, the Lucina, and that's how Yifan will win, or by resignation.
As you predicted correctly, anything could happen, and this has happened. White won the first bullet game, and it's already 7-2.
Yeah, just not really Sara's day. She's had plenty of good positions and plenty of positions that she should have held or even won that didn't go her way. And I think all credit is to Yifan here. It's not that we're trying to take anything away from her. She has been very resourceful when she needed to be. And she also played some excellent games herself where she was the one with the upper hand and she didn't take her foot off the gas and was able to win those games. So throughout this match, it seemed like Yifan was a little sharper in critical moments, and thus is why she is up 7-2.
I think she was also a little bit more somehow she was playing better when it was coming to the last seconds, because we have already seen some of the games which she won in the last seconds. So basically she was a little bit better in calculation and a little bit better in the last seconds of the game. And I think this game doesn't go well for Sara, doesn't go well at all. Queen e7 check, and however white defends, whichever piece came to e2, then yeah, bishop f3 was coming.
This is called the Reti opening quiet system, apparently, according to chess.com's opening explorer, and this was anything but quiet. I feel like this was really loud and tactical.
Yeah, there was d4 in the very beginning of the game, so perhaps g3 was a little bit premature, because after d4 black opened this diagonal, and now it's just crushing. Knight d3 or knight f3.
Yeah, black's already up but actually there's some play here. Like knight f3, king f2, and the queen on e7, the black king still on g8, the bishop on h1 is kind of trapped in here. Somehow this isn't as over as I would have assumed it was going to be.
It's never over until it's actually over, so you really have to be precise with the moves. And Huifai was taking quite a lot of time. She came up with queen d6, which is a very logical move, and now she's trying to make the position as easy as possible. Perhaps long castle now, or bishop d5 and long castle. Yes, now it's easy to play finally.
Finally, because it was getting very tricky there for a second.
Yes, because it was in the beginning. It looked like it's very easy. It wasn't a blunder. Okay, we can still play d4 and defend it.
Nice move g6 because the bishop was pinned. Nice move bishop d6.
Look how Sara is fighting. Bishop e6.
Oh, rook takes e7 check is coming, so you have to play king d8 here. I think you have to play king d8.
Okay, bishop d7 and
it's still good for white. Bishop e6 and pawn d5. Oh, bishop takes d4, stealing my very needed pawn.
Well, but okay, it was completely hopeless after like 10 moves, and now she has good chances at least to make a draw or maybe even to win, because anything can happen. And anything will happen. Rook d5, very nice, very nice. Rook b5, rook b4.
I'm just stopping to appreciate that you saying that anything can and will happen. So I thank you for humoring me. And white's better here, I feel like.
b5, okay.
Bishop d3, go after those pawns. Oh, or don't.
She blocked this pawn, very good. Move the rook. Yes.
Now rook c2 is what you want to play.
Rook b2, rook a2, rook b2. Okay, rook c2. Rook somewhere.
Yeah, rook f5 check coming. I think king c5, king b4, king c3 is something to consider, but instead she just blocks here. And okay, Yifan is defending this very well for what looks like a better position for white. Ooh, king e6. Okay.
Bishop c4. No, she decided to try. Okay, it's a draw.
Complete draw.
But what a fight! What a fight!
For a bullet game especially, just... Wait a second. Is it a draw? Bishop d1?
I think it's a draw.
King f3? And then h5?
Because you just keep the king on 8-8
Oh.
and you're just waiting and you give the bishop for the b pawn.
I'm so happy this happened because I always talk about bishop and wrong color rook pawn. This is the one time I forgot to do it. And thankfully, I have a partner, a co-commentator here who is doing it for me. Thank you so much for reminding the viewers that this is the h8 square is a dark square. This is a light square bishop. So all black needs to do is sacrifice her bishop for the b pawn. And it is immediately a theoretically drawn position.
Yes, and we have seen that Ho Yifan spotted it immediately. She immediately brought the king to 8-8. She didn't care about anything about g2 pawn, about what's going on. She'll just keep the bishop, yes. So this game was a draw.
And I'm going to get where I realized my match clock had a little bit more time. And yep, that was the final game. So this match is officially over. Yifan wins 7.5, 2.5. And so she gets third place. She wins the larger prize. And well, that was a really great effort by her. And I have to give credit to Sarah as well. The score does not really reflect the level of play she was showing today. 7.5, 2.5, a 5-game spread. I think this was more like a 2 to 3 game spread, and with some blunders causing her to face an even greater deficit.
Yes, congrats to Yifan, and also congrats to Sarah, as you have mentioned, because in many of the games she really had nice positions, and I believe she should have gained more points today. Though I'd also say that Ho Yifan was a little bit better, and she really deserved to be the winner today. So congratulations for the third place. Congratulations to Sarah once again. And I think we are slowly moving to the final match. We have been waiting so long to see it.
We have indeed, and we are getting set for Alexander Kostenyuk to take on Humpi Koneru. And I see the players are getting set up in a call. I'm joining that one so I can bring them on stream later. And I mean, Yifan, she was one bullet game away from making it to the final against Alexander Kostenyuk. And that's credit to Humpi Koneru for winning that last bullet game in what was a really epic finale. So for Yifan, probably some disappointment that she was not able to make the super final. However, she's shown really good chess, and everyone is excited that she's playing these online events.
Yes, not only the viewers, but also the players. I have heard what other participants said, and we girls, we were so excited that she was playing this tournament, because she was a rare guest in the women's events. So it's really glad she's back and we had a chance to play with her again. And I think her biggest problem was the first leg, where she was not into the tournament, and I think she was eliminated in round 2 or 3. I think even in round
2.
So she didn't get many points for that leg, and this is what actually prevented her from showing the better result, because in the next one she was in the final, and she was very close to win this final. And in this one she also showed a good play, and she was third. So if she played the first one a little bit better, if she showed a little bit better result, and if she gained more points in that leg, she would really pretend to be in the super final. And that would have been even more exciting if more people were fighting for these spots.
Yeah, and speaking of somebody fighting for the spot, Alexandra Kostenyuk deserves so much praise for how strong she has played throughout all of the WSCC events. She's had some really great performances. I'll bring up the leaderboard just to remind everybody of what we're talking about here, as she comes into this final here with 12 points. She's had 2 different third place match victories, She in the first leg and in the third leg, and now we're in the last one where she's in the final. So she's performed extremely well throughout the WSCC, and with a victory, and you see the standings just change because Sarah and Hoifan were given their points for the final one. Alexandra, she has a blank where L4 takes place. If she wins, she gets 12 points, and she's actually the winner of the Grand Prix stage.
Yes, Alexandra, she had 2 third places, and it's a very stable result. So it's really interesting how she will do in the final. And she will definitely have a lot of pressure on her shoulders because if she wins it, she will play in the super final. While for Humpy Konaru, it's less stressful. But anyway, sometimes it's better that when you have more pressure, sometimes it's worse. And soon we will know what is actually more important here.
Yeah, sometimes the pressure can be a good thing. You're nervous, you care, you have a lot on the line. Other times, like too much on the psychology. So the games are getting underway here. We see in the first one, Kostyanyuk has the white pieces, and we get a Petrov, which is certainly every viewer's favorite opening. They love how tactical and sharp the Petrov is. It's definitely not a solid and positional game at all, right, Anna?
But you know, after knight c3, the fifth move knight c3, the game is getting sharper. White is going for a long castle, and if black is going for a short castle, it's like opposite castle. The white is trying to attack, but it seems like black doesn't want to go for a short castle. They also prefer castling long, so queen d7 is the plan, and then castling alone. So yeah, it's not the position the viewers really like to watch, but it's not such an easy position, to be honest. I played this line myself with white pieces, so you have to be careful how you play it, because sometimes it looks like, okay, this position, everything is balanced, no tactical tricks, but you may make a few inaccuracies or some not correct moves, and then you will feel yourself that you will find yourself in some troubles. And finally, short castle. So this game will be exciting. Now, it will not be boring. Don't worry, viewers. Everything will be cool. G4 will come one day, maybe not immediately, but there will be some attack.
And Bishop d3 played so that maybe there won't be an attack.
No, there will be the attack. There will be the attack. Where G4 or H4 will be played.
Okay.
Especially knowing Alexandra, she's a very active player. She will create something here. Don't worry.
She definitely is extremely creative. There's no denying that. And she will try. How do you create an attack? If you trade the bishops off, like if bishop takes d3, queen takes d3, where's the attack going to come from?
The attack is coming very easily. You play h4, knight g5, and here you're already threatening the mate. Just 2 moves. Robert, you see how easy it is?
I mean, I learn something new every day. Thank you, Anna, for telling me how easy h4, knight g5, try to checkmate on h7. Got it. So for everybody who's watching, that's all it takes. It's just a knight hopping forward, and you get the mate.
That's why bishop d3 wasn't, but g4 was played. I told you.
I'm with you here. And actually, g4 is just a useful move for the potential of an attack, just stopping some of black's easy play, and black was forced to trade on d3, improving white's queen, and I think black should try to do the same with queen to e6. I'm pretty sure it's a common idea to try to trade queens on like e4, so move your bishop out the way, play queen e6, which attacks the a2 pawn as well, and then try to get the queens off.
One more typical idea in this position for black is to play f5, because you open your f8 rook. You threaten to take on g4, and as the knight on f3 is unprotected, and sometimes even by playing f5, it looks like you're opening the king, but in fact you're also sometimes stopping white's attack, as then there is no h4. Oh, f5 was played. Nice. I really like it.
Okay, so does white play g5, or do I play queen d5 check, which protects my knight on f3 and forces your king to the corner, and then just move my king over to b1? Because I'm trying to figure out, do I want to sort of close the king side but gain space? She plays queen d5 check, and I expect her to do something with, I don't know, rook g1 or...
G5 is a cool idea. On one hand, you're kind of blocking the lines, so it will be more difficult to attack after g5, but on the other hand, you gain more space, then there is no bishop f6, and the bishop is very passive on e7, so g5 definitely deserves some attention.
And she chose knight to d4 instead, which offers an exchange of knights, trying to put a piece on the d4 square head over to the g7 pawn. But it feels like with trades, black's position is actually improving, because black has the better pawn structure. White has these double pawns over here on the queen side, but that's not even why I think black's pawn structure is better. I'm looking at the f3 square. Well, now I'm not looking anymore. So before I could finish my thought, the f3 square was one that was like, maybe black's rook will end up sitting there if it's trade on g4 with, start trading pieces off. Instead, f4 was played. So Anna, back to you. What do you make of this decision to play f4 and kind of close down the king side?
Yeah, okay, f4, getting more space, now knight d4, though I would also prefer taking on d4 first and only then think if I want to play f4 or if I want to do something else. But c6, now perhaps d5, then put your bishop on d6, maybe it's okay for black. If black manages to stabilize everything, this will look cool for black. There's d5, bishop d6, rook e4, rook e8. I mean, if you make 10 moves with black, the position would be really cool.
Okay, I'm not going to let you make 10 moves. I'll give you maybe 2 moves maximum. And I'm trying to think, though, what white does, because this pawn on f4 is one that could backfire in an endgame. So, like, if you can try to visualize queens and the 2 rooks coming off, this pawn f4 is actually a bad thing. So that's very far down the line, but it will dictate how you play to some extent. And the bishop went to h4 of all squares.
This move really surprised me. What is the bishop doing on h4? I didn't expect that. I wanted to place the bishop on d6 where it would defend the f4 pawn, but bishop on h4. Okay, it's attacking the f2 pawn, but it's well protected by the queen on f3. While the bishop on h4 isn't placed convincingly.
Yeah, And the bishop is just such a strange square. I get that it puts some pressure on f2, but the queen's not going to be dislodged from f3 anytime soon, unless you have queen d5, which I guess is an option. It just looks strange.
She may play queen d5 now, but this will spoil black's structure, and also the pawn on f4 will be handy. I mean, if you trade the queens and trade the rooks. So instead, d5 was played. But once again, what the bishop on h4 is doing. Okay, it stops white from playing h4, but now h4 wasn't really attacking, not something that is so dangerous for black. Anyway, okay, let's forget about this. We have a new position.
I would play bishop b4, and then try to play bishop d6, and then bishop e5. And we talked about playing 10 moves in a row.
Oh,
I'm only asking for 3.
On e5, it would be it would be played so nicely. Bishop on e5.
I think you should do it, right? But after bishop b4, just you either trade on e1, in which case I'm happy to take over the e file for the time being, and your f4 pawn is going to become a little more vulnerable. Rook e5 also is probably a good move there.
Rook e5. So if black does nothing, then white will play rook d1. So instead, black decided to trade these rooks.
And now that's a passed pawn here on e5.
It's a passed pawn.
Oh my gosh, Humpy's down 2+ minutes. I mean, that's something that she struggled with, is against Yifan, she was always down well over a minute on the clock.
But I don't think that it's only versus Hui Fan, but I think this is the reason actually Humpy Cornero is not, I mean, not like as she is not so good in Blitz, but I think she is better in classical chess or in Rapid. Okay, in Rapid she's the reigning women's world champion. But when it comes to Blitz, I believe that she's playing the opening stage quite quickly, but then between the middle game and the end game, she spends too much time. She definitely needs to play a little bit quicker, because then when she's like down to 20 seconds, she starts playing quickly, but sometimes she really lacks a little bit more time. She needs to convert some advantages. Like, for example, in this position, she had quite a good position, but now I think she's ruining it. Rook d2.
That bishop went the bishop went to h4, and then white's bishop went to a5 into c7 to d6 now, and white is just stealing these pawns. So you're attacking b4, you're attacking d5, f4 is weak. Pick the pawn to take. I think queen takes
Be careful, bishop g5. Queen f4, bishop g5.
Oh, so queen takes d5. Let's take that one instead.
How about the f2 pawn?
Then e6.
Yes, looks like white should be quicker. e7 or rook e5 or what is? So rook f5.
Bishop takes e7. What black will end up sacrificing the exchange there?
So rook f5, bishop e7, rook e5.
And then take on
Something
d6.
like that.
Yeah.
Or maybe bishop f6 now.
Bishop f6 is possible. And look at this. She's going for the f3. If you
Oh
take
my god, what a trick! f3.
Oh,
Wow.
Humpy has been really good, despite the fact that she's down on time often. She finds these things, and you actually kind of entice your opponent to play quickly. So Alexandra's been playing more quickly than she needs to, considering she's 1 minute and 40 seconds on her clock.
Oh my god, this trick with f3 was super cool.
And now it's an even position, probably. Although, with pawns on opposite sides of the board, it's going to become a race.
True, so black wants to do something like king h7 and h5, and white should be careful. Actually, in this race, it's real and clear. It's not like it's a dead draw, because if the pawns were on the same side, 3 versus 3, of course it's a draw. But when the pawns are on different flanks, then it's not so clear. You have to calculate, and Alexandra is taking her time.
I think black's pawns are quicker. King h7, good move.
King h7, yes, and now it's important to play king h7, because if black played h5 immediately, then there was a check on the back rank.
Oh, she took with the pawn on g4. I thought she was going to take with the rook. But now...
c6.
Wait, c7! You can't stop the pawn!
c7, rook h8, and rook d8.
Ooh.
So that's what happening. That's c8 queen. White is first.
Oh my, that's what happens when you spend too much time and don't have enough time to calculate. And Alexandra Kostenyuk, she takes this game here. She was better earlier, but let's go back really quickly. First to that f3 move that was really nice by Humpy there, just to give up her bishop. She takes the pawn, gives up her bishop on e7 because the f-pawn distracts white's pieces. And then as we got to the endgame, she was not able to get her rook back in time. She probably should have taken on g4 with her rook, and then that way she would have been able to stop the pawn's promotion.
I really feel sad for Humpy, because it's not the first time she's losing the games this way. She's playing very well on the last seconds. She found the trick, this f3 trick, within like 1 second or 2 seconds. So she sees the tactics very quickly. But then when she really needs just a few seconds more on her clock, she doesn't have them, and she's losing the games. I mean, once again, it's not the first game she lost this way. Unfortunately, she has to be a little bit quicker in the middle game, and then everything would be nice for Humpy. Let's see if she will play quicker in the next games.
Yes, I'm bringing her up on screen for everybody. She has the white pieces here in general with these pawns on e2 and d4. So you have an e and d pawn for white. Black has only one pawn clearly in the center. It's e6 pawn. It's unclear if you play e4 or if you should sit on that move, because e4 will make some of the squares a little bit more vulnerable. But here I think you're just taking up space. I like how white's position has become out of the opening here.
Looks nice for white, double fianchetto. So if white manages to keep the structure and not allowing black's counterplay, it should be a better position for white. But be careful with some tricks like knight c5, knight e5, then perhaps sometimes knight d3. So knight e5 was played. Okay, now the knights are jumping. Alexandra really likes when the knights are jumping.
She does. And, well, the d3 square is one that I'm a little nervous about, but for the time being, you're not going to be able to... Whoa.
Whoa.
Oh, queen takes d4 is knight d5?
Knight d5? Does it work?
I think so. Queen d4, knight d5, hitting the queen, hitting the bishop on e7. If you play queen c5, rook a to c1, hitting your queen again. Then I'm going to take on e7, take on e5. is crazy. Tactics everywhere.
But it's a very nice tactics from Humpy, once again proving she's really good in calculation. Though she's considered to be more a strategical player, more positional player, but she sees all these combinations very quickly. And this is already the second game that proves that. Queen e2, awesome move. Now, Alexandra is taking her time. I wouldn't have taken on d4 if I were on Alexandra's shoes, but let's see what will happen.
So she played bishop c5, rook e to d1. The knight is still hanging here, but after bishop takes d4, there's knight to b5. And this is such an interesting sacrifice by Humpy. She realizes she's winning the material right back, and now she's creating real problems for Alexandra. Queen on d8 is threatened by this rook on d1. White has gained some important space, has nicely... Also, let's make a comment on about this long diagonal from a1 to g7. There are many, many, many pieces there. We're playing checkers.
Yes, indeed. I love what Hump is doing, and she's playing very quickly this game. So rook e1, we may just look a little bit more on this line. Bishop d4, knight b5. If bishop takes f2, intermediate move, queen f2. Now the queen and the knight is under the attack, so basically the only move is queen b8, I believe. And I don't see the way how white can regain the pawn, but white definitely has a very serious initiative. Oh, there is perhaps bishop a3 and bishop d6 in the end.
That looks really, really strong, for sure. And in the game, bishop d4, knight b5, we might see something like this, where bishop takes f2, the queen takes on f2. You have an extra pawn for black, but white has the bishop pair, has more control over the board, is first into the... not the attack in terms of a checkmating attack, but you have the initiative. And so, I mean, bishop f2 is a hard move not to play, considering you've already given up the bishop pair. What else could... she takes. Okay.
She takes. So queen b8 must be played. Or is there anything else? Knight e7, but knight e7 is passive. Yeah, queen b8. Alexandra will not make any passive moves. I mean, there is a possibility not to make them.
What about knight d6 here? Cutting off the queen's defense of the knight on e5 and trying to take the second bishop off the board? She plays it.
Knight e6 and played very quickly. Did she consider bishop a3?
Maybe there was knight g4 type of tactics available, and so she...
Or even giving the exchange for e4 pawn, also unclear. So, okay, knight d6 was played, knight e7.
And this is one of those positions where I'm never certain if I have the white pieces. Do I just sit and do nothing because black doesn't really have a next move? Or do I play e5? Like, do I have to rush? Or should I play like rook a to c1? Or rook to d2 and rook a to d1? Anna, what would you do here?
I don't know. I'm the one who prefers some direct approach, so I would definitely consider e5 first. But what would I play? I can't say. I don't know.
And the reason I'm a little nervous to play e5 is I give the d5 square, so I feel like I've given something important to my opponent. Whereas if I say, Anna, black has a free move, what would you do here? Like,
that's not clear.
I didn't mean to ask the most difficult question in the world, but your reaction was like, I don't really know, and it just goes to show that black's position is quite tricky.
Yes, you are right that black doesn't really have a good move. Maybe e5.
Aha.
e5 blocking the b2 bishop. Because the drawback of playing e5 with white is that you are covering the b2 bishop. Then it's not as active as it is now. g4. Look at that.
I love that move.
I mean, it's so cool, g4.
And because she had plenty of time, she was able to spend 1 minute and 24 seconds, and she still has a lead on the clock. So her time management has been better in this game. G4 says, please take me on g4. I'll play queen to g3, and thank you for the monstrous attack on the diagonal here. Knight gf6, I'm just going to finish the tactic. Knight takes b7, queen takes b7, rook takes d7, and you can't take with the knight because of checkmate on g7. After queen takes is bishop f6, and white is just completely crashing through and crushing black's defenses. This is amazing stuff.
Yes, G4, I think it's a very strong move, and I'm so glad Humpy made it. In general, I think Humpy started to play a much more sharper chess in the last years.
It's all happening. Knight takes b7, the line I was just talking about.
It's happening, Knight b7.
And then rook takes d7. It's all happening.
She did play it. Oh my god, finding G4 was so difficult, but she calculated this all. Wow.
Oh my gosh.
She's playing so strong. I mean, this game from Humpy, it's amazing game. Now Queen F4.
Yeah, Queen G5 or Queen F4 and just go Queen H6, right? Just.
I don't see any defense.
Oh, wait a second. No, never mind. Okay, you're gonna laugh. I said Queen D4 check.
Good try. If it was a bullet game, it's.
Oh gosh, I'm cracking myself up. I was like Queen D4 check. The rook on A1's hanging.
It's hanging. It's definitely hanging.
Oh, so everybody, my point was that your Queen D4 check. But that gives up the queen. It's good for everybody to realize that I also make terrible moves sometimes. So, Queen G5 was played.
We are all human. What to do?
Oh my gosh, and resignation on the spot because.
I mean, what a game by Humpy. I think it's the best game of the tournament, perhaps. Perhaps she can win this prize if it existed.
I'm going to actually open that game up so I can show it later and remember it and show it to students and everything positive with that game. Maybe I'll write an article about that game because I'm just going to open it and have it saved. Okay, but we now are back to a Petrov. So, of course, we certainly are going to see crazy tactical sacrifices in this one too, right, Anna?
Of course it will happen. Will we see short castle, or will black go for a long castle this time? No, still a short castle. Okay, bishop d3 was played in the previous game. What will happen now? Bishop d3. That makes sense because if you won the game and you are repeating the moves, it's like you're putting your opponent in the uncomfortable position because it's your opponent who has to think what went wrong, and she didn't have time to think because she just played the previous game, right? So she has to come up with some new setups while she will spend time to take the decision. F5 now, but I really like this position for white. Okay, Queen d5, this we have already seen. Queen d5, King h8. Then
it's kind of funny, Anna, because these are one of those situations where I'm like, oh, if they had a break, if they were moving into the next time control, they probably looked at something for improvements.
Yeah.
No, they just have to rely on their brains here and like, what can I do differently? So what do you think is going to happen differently, and when will we see our first new move of the game?
So knight d4 was played in the previous game, right? And now Alexander went for rook g1, which is the deviation.
That looks much more natural than knight d4 ever did to my eyes. And, well, I need glasses, so my eyes are not always very good. But rook g1 makes so much sense because you're trying to put your rook on the king side for an attack. And if you ever take on g4, that's a really bad decision because I'll take with the h-pawn, and now I have an attack on the h-file. So, I mean, this looks promising. f4 played once again.
F4 once again, maybe it makes sense in this position too because the rook is on g1 and h1 and they are not active anymore after black played f4. But once again, the pawn on f4, it's vulnerable. It's not so easy to play bishop f6 now. Well, you still can because there is a little trick that after bishop f6, if white takes on f4, then black takes on c3. But after you play bishop f6, you always have to calculate, I mean, bishop f4, if it works, if it doesn't work. So Humpy didn't want that, I believe.
Yeah, and putting the bishop on f6 would have invited g5 with the tempo. Not that that was the end of the world, but there are times when white is just trying to push the pawns, storm them down the board, and create an attack. And the problem I'm having with black's position is that because of the double pawns on c2 and c3, white has more space. Whenever you have double pawns, inherently you have an open file for your pieces, and here it's the d file, and so the queen is sitting on d5, the knight can't move because b7 will be hanging. Black's pieces are sort of stepping on each other's toes, and I can't even come up with a really good move for black at this point. Maybe rook to e2 to at least attack something, but it's a one-move threat that I'm not seeing a follow-up for.
But rook e2 is a good move. I mean, if white will defend the f2 pawn, and of course they will not give it for free. Then just place another rook on e8, try to occupy the e file. Well, h4, I don't know what white really want by playing h4. Okay, the idea may be h4, h5, h6, and then open this diagonal so that
Anna, how quickly you forget. The point of h4 was to play queen d3 and knight g5 and queen takes h7.
I mean, this is what I said, yes.
And then you took it back. And, well, here, your point about the f4 pawn being a weakness is actually going to be... I thought rook e1 was better than king d1, but I thought once you try to trade the rooks off the board, the f4 pawn becomes truly weak.
Well pointed. So will rook e1 be played now? h5 now. Alexander is always trying to go for attack, but it's somehow more comfortable to have the pawn on h5 rather than on h4, because once again, look at the bishops. These bishops are dark squared bishops. So put your pawns on the light squares, not like what Humpy is doing, not h6. Because if one day, maybe today, we will go to the just a bishop endgame, then these pawns like g7, h6, f4, they may be the targets.
That's true. Actually, I think a bishop endgame would probably just be losing for black because of these pawns on the dark squares, as you're correctly stating. And now rook e1, this is a tough moment for Humpy because she doesn't want to give up the e-file. If she plays rook to e8, she did that. Bishop takes f4 is a pawn that can be captured, I'm pretty sure.
Can it be? Bishop f4, rook e1, followed by rook f8. Then you have rook e4.
But rook e1, I have knight e1.
I have knight e1. Yeah, right.
But
knight e1.
I'm going to show what you were trying to point out, which is actually very nice. Rook f8, hitting the bishop and the knight on the f-file. And after rook e4, you have d5, and the rook is not going to be able to stay on the fourth rank, and black is going to win the bishop, and then behind it, the knight.
Yes, it's very important that knight takes on e1, and we get rid of this pin, and this was played. Now knight d3, protecting the bishop and the pawn on g4. So the next move will be f4. Okay. Here after bishop g5, we'll first take on g5 and then play f3.
Yeah, and this knight takes e1, it was well spotted by Alexandra, and Humpy, I'm pretty sure, missed that move because it's so easy to miss retreating moves, right? When you think of rook to e1 and capturing back, you of course want to take with your rook, get away from the h-file towards the center, but Alexandra understood that she can win a pawn in this manner and not have to pay any consequences whatsoever. Here, rook to f1, next move king to d2. White is simply up a pawn in an endgame, and it's not like this is that easy to win, but White has tremendous winning chances and can push without any risk whatsoever.
And knight e5, I think it was a good idea, trying to bring the game into the rook endgame, because the rook endgame are known to have a lot of drawing tendencies. So rook d5. Also, once again, black can't trade the rooks because the pawn endgame without the pawn is a lost endgame. Black has to keep the rooks on the board.
And now Alexandra's thinking, do I bring my king into the center with king e2, but that blocks my rook? Or should I just go king to c1, which makes my king a little bit less helpful in this endgame? But I think you can slow play this. c4 is coming for white, then b3, then you're going to bring your king to d2. You just have to march forward because I don't actually see black coming up with any real plan. Black's plan is to stop white from winning pawns or pushing forward. That's the only thing that I can think of.
And white's plan, I think that sooner or later they have to bring the king to the king's side, because this is the side where white is a pawn up, so it's better to bring the king to g3 and then play f4, but she played f4 immediately.
And I feel like, based on your tone, you're saying that you thought this move was a little rushed.
I think it's a little bit premature, but maybe it's not so bad.
No, I kind of agree with you, but now she played king f6. Is she going to play f5 here?
She played c4, so the only move is rook c5. Rook on c5 is not well placed.
And this is exactly why it was premature, though. G takes f4, rook takes f4, is king g5. And black's king is now very active in a way it couldn't have been if we just scroll back to this position with the king on f7. With the pawn on f3, that black king's going nowhere. Now after the trades, I mean, black's king is super active. And white is better because the king is about to get cut off on the h-file, at least, and the rook is hitting c7. But how do you make progress from here, Anna?
Yes, I'm not sure it's win now because, okay, the next move is king h6 trying to kick the rook from the 7th rank, or if the rook moves to d7 or e7, we bring the king closer to the queen's side. So I think it looks more like drawish rather than white has chances to win. King g6, king f6, king e6.
Yeah, the moves, you can almost pre-move them. But let's see what white can do, because I feel like there's still some trickiness. The rook on c5 is stuck there. So I'm trying to come up with plans that white can use here. Maybe a4, king d4, pawn c3, pawn b4. I know that's a long story, but if I can play my king to d4, pawn to a4, c3, b4, I'm kicking your rook on c5, and that makes your life much more difficult.
Right, but maybe you can do it even quicker if you go a3 and b4 immediately.
Oh, she played b5. That's a big decision there.
I think it's a good move, because if we trade the b pawns, then there are no plans with the white breaking with b4.
So maybe Alexandra should have started with a4 to stop b5 instead of king c3, which is so natural, bringing your king forward. Perhaps it was better to start with a4. In this game, now after the trade here, no progress. Right? You can give white like 5 free moves. Oh, well, then you go rook d8, rook b8, rook b5. Okay, I take it back. So there is at least one plan there that has potential winning chances, but for the most part, it doesn't look like anything of note.
So now I think black has only 2 moves, like king f6 or c6, but both are okay.
Mm-hmm. And then the rook on c5 is threatening, not really threatening, but can go rook g5, rook h5, rook h4 check. She's just going to have king e6, king f6.
I think that now she can play king e6, king f6 forever. Okay, not if white goes king rook d8, but it's a draw. And what a save by Humpy.
Wow.
Wow. Yes, really. Wow. I think Alexandra pushed f4 too quickly in that game, because she was really very close to winning that game.
Yeah, I'm going to pull that position up before we go on our break, because at this point in time, after a5 on move 31, we looked at f4. That, of course, is the plan. But just because the plan doesn't mean we have to do it right now, and it might be better executed if we sort of improve our pieces. So, Anna, you and I were both talking about, instead of f4, playing c4 to force this rook to c5 anyway. You can't play rook e5 and trade rooks. The pawn in the game is always going to be losing. So you play rook to c5, and then you play king to d2, and then you play king to e3, and then you play f4 when the time suits you best, instead of rushing it as she did in the game. Right?
Yes, I think it was a much better way to do that, but Alexander tried to do it immediately, and it didn't work. So yes, when you have some plan, try to think how to do it in the best way, and if you have time, try to put your pieces in the best possible places, so that when you play f4, everything suits you well. There is no counterplay like black got with king f6, king g5. And that's it.
Yeah, and just to show that once more, that the king ended up taking on, going to g5 and stealing all of the pawns, right? So it backfired very quickly, and even this position looked good for white. It was nothing concrete. So Anna and I, we're going to go to a break. When we return, we will have the 3+1 time control of this FIDE Chess.com Women's Speed Chess Championship Grand Prix Final. Stay tuned, everybody. We'll be back shortly.
See you soon.
And we return here ready for the 3+1 time control. It is a tied matchup, 1.5, 1.5. Everything on the line here for Alexandra Kostenyuk. She needs to win this match to make the super final. Anna, based on what you've seen so far, who is the favorite as we head into the quicker time control?
I think we don't have the real favorite right at the moment. I really enjoy the games. Both of the players are showing great chess. I think Alexandra is a bit disappointed by the missed chance in the last game, though I hope she already forgot about it and she's ready for the new games, which are about to start.
Yeah, she had some missed opportunities there. I think she'll be okay getting rid of that one. And for Humpy, she needs to improve out of that opening because 2 times we've seen her play this move f5 to f4 out of this Petrov, and I don't think we've liked her positions that much. They've been uncomfortable, and in that game, this third game of the match, she was really about to be in huge trouble if Alexandra didn't push that pawn to f4 too soon.
Yes, indeed. Happy definitely had problems in both of her Petrov games, and I think she will improve something in the next games. While she had a fantastic game when she was white, and this victory I will remember for a long time. It was such a beautiful game.
Yeah, that was a really epic game there. I am glad we were able to have the call for it and witness it. And now we have this position. We've seen a fianchetto bishop on the queen side for Humpy every time she's had the white pieces, and it looks like Kostenyuk has opted for a different setup because her bishop had gone to b7 in the previous game, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I think that Alexandra played b6 first, bishop b7, and Humpy placed her bishop on g2. Now she opted for e3, and I think she will place her bishop on either on e2 or b5, so it will be a little bit a different setup, though some of the ideas are similar. Sooner or later, white will go for d4, and then maybe we will see the game with the isolated pawn again if the d2 pawn and c5 pawns will be traded. But okay, it's a little bit too far. Let's see how the game will proceed. First of all, bishop b5 or bishop e2.
Right.
Bishop b5 was played.
Anna, you made some really astute points there. The problem I have, not with your points, but with Humpy's play, is look how much time she spent. She's down to 2 minutes and it's only move 7. And now that we're in the 3-minute time control, she can't afford to spend a minute on the clock in the first 10 moves of the game.
Yeah, she's really spending a little bit too much time when she comes out of the opening theory, and as I have mentioned before, I think this is the point she should improve in her play, not like in her play, but in her time management. Anyway, the position is okay. She still has almost 2 minutes, so there is still time. And d4 was played, so will we see isolated pawn? This is the question.
I don't know. We should ask Huga, and she'll sing a song for us about an isolated pawn. So we do have the isolated queen's pawn, an IQP on d5, and that pawn is potentially weak because it cannot be protected by another pawn, and a pawn's best friend is a fellow pawn. However, it can be strong because they're open lines. The c file, the e file in particular, is useful for black because if I put my rook on e8, I have a pretty long file to work with, whereas if this rook goes to e1 for white, it's just running into your own pawn. So that's the good news for black. The bad news is the Isolani there. So, Anna, do you like playing with or against the isolated pawn?
According to my opinions, I'm the one who is more likely to play with the isolated pawn, but also I have had many games when I was playing against the isolated pawn, for example, from the Alapin line in the Sicilian. So I have experience from both sides. It's like when you are playing with the isolated pawn, you have to play actively, like bishop g4, rook e8, rook c8, sometimes sacrifices on f2, on e3. Okay, this knight is gone already, so you don't have this opportunity anymore. While when you are on the side who is playing against the isolated pawn, you have to keep everything stable, to attack this pawn, to trade the minor pieces, and then if you have everything under the control, you are better. So queens off. What will happen after rook d8? First of all, which rook will take? Because this is the question.
The f rook, because not much action is happening in the center of the board or on the king side. So taking with the f rook leaves the a7 pawn defended just in case. And I know that white is going to take on c6. Like as soon as I take with my rook on d8, Humpy is going to say bishop takes c6 and then play knight to e5. And this is exactly what's happening. And the pawn on c6 now can only be protected by bishop to d7. And then there's rook f to c1 and things like this. White's better. White's definitely better here.
Yes, therefore I don't like bishop d7 too much because perhaps in any case you can't defend the c6 pawn. So it's better not to place the bishop so passively. Maybe to give this pawn immediately like bishop e6. If white takes on c6, then there is rook d2, trying to look for some counterplay. Because black has the two bishop pair advantage, so there is definitely some compensation. It's not like the position is so clear at the moment. Maybe white even shouldn't take on c6 immediately.
And I think it's also a good illustration of why we took with the f rook rather than the a rook on d8. Because if knight takes c6, rook to d2, after move like bishop to d4, like it's good that the rook's on a8, just protecting this pawn on a7. So I feel a little bit happier about this. And we have seen rook to d2, and I think we might see bishop to d4. Oh, bishop c3, but 20 seconds left for Humpy.
Oh, really? I didn't pay attention to that, but 20 seconds, it's not so much. She would rather have a little bit more time. And one more good thing about the rook on a8, it may look passive now, but it's protecting the a7 pawn, as mentioned. And also there is a typical plan of playing a5, a4, where the rook on a8 will be really helpful. So it's really better that we have the rook on a8 and not on f8, because on 8-8, it's doing a much better job. Rook c8.
But ooh. But there's rook. Oh, okay. So I would say rook d8, but something about this. The knight's
But the knight is trapped. Look, bishop e7.
Oh my gosh, bishop e7 she goes a6. She says the knight's trapped no matter what. So I'd rather keep my queenside pawn. And if the knight takes on f7, so be it. King f8, king e8, bishop to e7. Thank you for your knight.
So the knight can't be saved. King e8 before.
Oh my gosh, what a turn of events there.
What's happening?
The knight's trapped. It's just trapped.
Knight is trapped. Okay, it's lost.
And resigned.
Oh god. Oh god. Oh no.
Anna, there was one move that I'm now thinking about where I'll just go very quickly because the action happens so fast here. That after this rook c8 move, because the bishop was the only piece that could come back to f8 to block a backrange checkmate, perhaps b4 to try to go b5. But that's a hard move to play. It does threaten the knight e7 check. There's rook d8 stuff, and the knight probably does not get trapped in this variation. Although I don't know if it's good for white. At least it doesn't get the knight trapped and lose immediately. So going on to the current game that we have here. Ooh, a lot has happened. And what do you make of the live board in game number 5?
Yeah, this was a very important victory for Alexandra, and she deserved it by fighting well, but I also think that Humpy didn't deserve to lose this game. But once again, let's mention that she was slow on time, and it's because she spent more than 1 minute on move like 7 or 8, and this is what you shouldn't. This is what you should not do in the blitz games.
You can't afford it. I mean, look at this position, right? The extra 25, 30 seconds for Alexandra, I think that's going to be important. This position is very complicated with pawns on d5 and e5. Are those strong pawns? You have 2 pawns in the center here compared to just 1 for white. But are those potentially weak pawns? Because my rook on e1 is putting pressure on e5. Maybe eventually I could play d4 to try to break the center. I don't even know who's better, but I know that white is ahead by almost a minute on the clock.
Oh, well pointed. I would say that black is doing well because they protected the e5 pawn and the d5 pawn in a very good way. There is no more ideas how to attack them. Knight d2 was played. Sometimes it's with the idea to play d4, and if black goes e4, then we try to play f3. So I think this is what Alexander is trying to do. But still, black's position is very nice, and the setup Humpy used in this game is already a popular setup. It has been used by many strong players, so According to elevation, it looks good, but you have to be careful what you do next. C4 played.
You know what I want to play here, Anna?
D takes C4?
No, I want to play rook a6, jumps over everything to g6.
Oh, what a nice move. I really love it. I mean, if you could do that, it could be a really strong move. And then bishop g4, bishop f3 looks very cool.
It's a dream. I know that I just woke up and realized, okay, rooks don't jump over. They don't fly to the other side of the board. But the point of the rook on a6 has to be some kind of rook lift maneuver, right? Otherwise, what's it doing there?
But Robert, wait. Maybe you will make some new kind of chess, Robert chess or Hess chess, where the rooks can jump over the pieces.
I mean, it's the cannon in Chinese chess.
You can do it in Chinese chess.
Yeah, there's a piece called a cannon which jumps over precisely one piece.
Wow. But if it's two, like bishop on e6 and knight on f6,
no, that's too many.
Oh, okay. I didn't know about that. Good. You see how I'm learning something.
I'm glad that I can help you learn at least one thing. That means that I've accomplished a lot in this commentary.
I love it. So what's happening if we are speaking about the game? Let's go back to the game.
Well, look at the time, first and foremost.
Oh God. 17 seconds.
And White's position is also looking really nice here. The position's opening up. Black has played g5, so the king side is weak. The e4 pawn will need defense. The knight, for example, the knight can't move away from f6, otherwise rook takes e4 immediately as a free pawn. This is too tough to play with no time on your clock.
Of course, queen b8 is a good move because White's threat was playing knight d6, so Black didn't allow that. But with 13 seconds, I don't believe Humpy will save it.
And look, it's queen a2 move. King g7, probably a decent move, but she had to play quickly. Now knight e3 threatens knight f5 check if the bishop goes to h5, and if the bishop goes to e6, there's d5. I mean, this position is just impossible to play with 8 seconds to your opponent's 2 minutes, 15 seconds.
Now bishop d1 is a tricky move. Alexandra decided to go for d5. The idea is knight d4. What about knight d4 now? Bring the knight to f5. One of the knights to f5.
Should play king g6.
Maybe it's a good move. Oh, why are you laughing?
Because you were like, this guy's crazy. And then you're like, hey, wait a second. Maybe he's not so bad. I honestly think Humpy's playing amazingly well, considering she has no time. I would have lost this game in like 2 moves. The fact that she still is playing and actually has decent chances here is really a testament to her skills and her improvement as a kind of bullet player. And this pawn on d6, I thought she was going to sacrifice. She's done it.
She had to sacrifice it because it was so strong. It was blocking both of the rooks. What will she do now? 3 seconds. Okay, queen
I was
a7.
thinking h5, h4 to try to attack, but she plays queen a7, which puts pressure on f2 even if it doesn't attack anything just yet. Although it keeps the rook on e1 stuck, because e3 would have been a move if the rook leaves. Here's h5.
h5, she's going for your plan.
Why not? h5, h4, h3.
King f6.
Oh, nice move, queen d4. I mean, king f6 probably, if you're playing for a win there, which I want to, but it's too scary, I guess, for her to bring the king out like this. And this is honestly not that bad of a position. The bishop on g4 stops the rook from coming to d1.
Yes, and the knight on e5 is very strong, and the rook on d4. So basically, she has all the pieces placed. And knight d3.
Oh, the bishop got
The bishop
trapped.
is again. Oh no, rook d1 is game over. Oh no. I think this is already the 3rd game which Humpy lost just because of the time pressure. So it's really difficult to thrive under the time when you're down to a few seconds. It's really difficult to play.
She probably played about 10 really good moves, like excellent moves under time trouble, and then she made one bad move that lost the game on the spot in a position where she really had been improving her chances. So that's what happens when you don't have enough time. You just cannot find every single correct variation, and when you're playing somebody as strong as Alexandra, you need to find the right move pretty much every single move you make.
Okay, at least every second. What is this line? What is this line about?
See, the line where you...
Complicated line.
It's even material, for those of you who are struggling to count like me. I'm saying it for myself, not for really anybody else. But even material, and this bishop can come to b7. I've seen Fabiano Caruana play this from the black side. He had a famous game against Dingley Ren in the... Was it the Singfield Cup, I want to say? Where it was like this really crazy draw that eventually happened. And the point is that black has this d5 square, and the bishop comes to b7 and looks really nice in the long diagonal, whereas white's pawn structure is healthier, and this pawn on c4 can be a problem to hold on to.
Alexandra is playing very quickly, so perhaps it's still the theory or the line she prepared before the match. I don't know, to be honest, but it looks like she is giving the c4 pawn. So if white takes on c4 now, black will perhaps take on c4, perhaps take on e3, maybe not. Maybe yes, maybe bishop a6, maybe rook b8. There are so many possibilities. I don't know what was Alexandra's idea, but she definitely had something in mind.
Yeah, it's now taking on e3. It's one of these moments where a lot of people are like, I have the two bishops, coach. You always told me that getting the bishop pair is great. And it's nice to have the bishop pair, but you've also opened up the f-file, and queen e1 to g3 is a possibility that didn't exist before. Not saying that's the end of the world for black. It isn't. But there are new possibilities for white that were not available to her before this capture happened.
Yes, Robert was just speaking about the plans for white, so it's now my turn to speak about the plans for black. And the plan for black, I think that they will soon play c5, because look at these pawns on c4 and c7. When they are doubled, they are definitely weak, but after you play c5, then you take on d4, then you can protect the c4 pawn by playing rook c8. So c5 was played, and I believe this is the right approach. This is the right thing to do in this position.
I agree. And as you're pointing out, white's center can collapse quite quickly with a bishop takes f3 and c takes d4, which is why rook d1 was played, protecting this pawn on d4 and also kind of forcing black to do something, as the queen loses every battle when it's on the same line as a rook.
So now just rook c8, and then maybe knight d5 or bishop d5, maybe bishop d5, and maybe even play something like f5. No, I meant f5 after rook c8 and bishop d5, but Alexandra prefers to do everything immediately. She went for f5 right now.
So I have to take en passant, I believe. I can't imagine not doing so is going to be good. She does it, and this gives her the e5 square for her knight at some point. Also, bishop takes c4 works, because if knight takes c4, this queen takes e6 check. She found it.
So once again, Alexandra, if you have some plan, first improve the position of all the other pieces and then go for the plan. You could wait with f5 move, because even if it wasn't about the sacrifice on c4, I still prefer, I mean, the only piece which didn't come into play, it was rook on a8, and it was so logical to place the rook on c8 first. But let's see. I mean, black still has compensation. Okay, it's 2 pawns down, but the pawn on b2 is weak, and the pawn on d4 is also under the attack. So maybe she will save this game somehow.
Queen b4, I like that move, because especially, I know I sound like a broken record on it, but the clock situation does not favor Humpy. So trading queens, liquidating, making the position easier for her to play. That way she doesn't have to worry about any checkmates or things like that. I think queen b4 becomes the #1 move candidate that she played. So I think it's good. And I mean, the clock is really what's causing her problems. And, you know, some people say, oh, you know, the player who is up on time is lucky because she sets some bad positions. That's not really what this is about. It's about a strategy. Some people play extremely quickly and may take some risks in their approach, but as long as they're moving good moves fast, that's better than making the best move slowly. That's what some people will believe. Others will say, let me take my time so that I get a good position, and then if I can have good mouse speed, good bullet skills, then I can convert into a full point. So it's a matter of taste.
Yes, it's always necessary to find the balance between the best moves and the quick moves. So let's say now Humpy may actually be in time to convert this game, because she is already in the end game. The position is relatively not that complicated. C4,
nice
very good
move.
Really nice move. Bishop c4 was not possible. because of knight c4 and the mate on the back rank. And now just bring the king closer to the center. King f2, king e3, king d4. Rook a6 is also good.
And rook d6
Rook
threatened.
d6, rook d8 was winning, all right.
Yeah, we both had the same idea of trying to checkmate. Now the king is the e7 square, so it's no longer a checkmate, but still, king e3, king d4, you were pointing this out. It's very simple for white to play this.
Very simple, but 13 seconds. If black creates at least one trap, it may work.
Yeah, but where are the traps? Knights are the tricky pieces, right? Bishops aren't that tricky. You know exactly what they're looking at.
I was thinking about rook b7, but I believe that king d4 was winning. There was also c6 more. Okay, let's...
b5. There it is.
b5, yes. These pawns are moving so quickly.
Yes.
Bishop f1, or what to do? Or b7.
Here just b6, right? Just and take with the rook even. Well, that can be an issue if you trade too much, and the endgame isn't always going to be winning. But here's c6 and king c5. Oh my gosh.
Rook e7. Seems like the move which will be played. Oh no. Rook e7, there was b6 trick.
2 seconds though. 3.5. She's barely getting these moves off in time. It's making me nervous. Rook f8 check. Just play quickly. Go. Oh my gosh. She barely got the move. Okay, she now is back to 3 seconds, but this is not easy to win anymore. The pawn on b5 is under attack.
Oh.
So king d5 played. You can't take on b5. The c pawn will run free. Take on a6, and now just bring her king to the king side. Knight e8. What a move!
She's playing very well. Bishop b5, there is c7.
Oh my gosh, knight e8 is brilliant.
King d6.
Yes, she's gonna go king d6 now. Oh my! Honestly, she's so impressive with no time on her clock.
Knight d5 and knight e7. Okay, or knight g8.
Yeah, knight e7 at least wins the pawn on g6, and
the pawn endgame is winning now. Okay, just knight e7 and c8 promote it just quickly and then run. Okay. Okay,
wow.
She won that game.
Oh my gosh.
Won that game, but what a stressful game.
I'm stressed out for her. Like, honestly, I think Alexandra is doing so well to continue the game in those moments, and then even there with like 0.7 seconds she makes a move, gets 1.7. Then she makes another quick move to get to 2.1 seconds. I mean, my heart is like palpitating.
I mean, can you imagine what Humpy's supporters, how did they feel in these moments? I mean, when they saw this 1 second on the clock, I believe it's not good for their nerves.
And
also, of course,
I'm looking at Humpy's camera. She looks stoic as ever. She's just...
I see.
Next game, she's ready. And credit to Humpy for the way that she's been handling the time pressure, but credit to Alexandra for continuously putting Humpy in that time pressure, because Alexandra's going for the openings quickly. She's coming up with good concepts. That game was just a really nicely done victory by Humpy Canero.
Right, and in general, I really love this match. Both of the players, they are fighting so well. They are finding very interesting traps, tricks. They are fighting until the very end. I'm really happy to be now together with you here commentating these games.
Oh, but only now. Until this point, you weren't happy. You're like, oh gosh, I gotta commentate with Robert. But now that the games are fun, you're like, okay, I can put up with him.
Yes, I don't regret it. I don't regret it anymore. No,
okay. You know, you probably had better ways to spend your Sunday. I get it. It's okay. I'm used to this. I'm just gonna lick my wounds over in the corner. All right, Anna, what do you think about the position at this point after d4, putting pressure on e5?
Oh, d4. What do you think about it? Castling? Happy. What was... okay, if white took on e5, then black would have taken on e4. Therefore, Alexandra preferred to play rook e1 first. I believe the position is slightly better for white, once again because of the better control of the central squares, because of these pawns on e4 and d4. I started laughing because I remember your words about spending Sunday in a better way rather than commentating here with you today. But yeah, it was a nice joke. Good job, Robert. But the position is not that funny. As our mood, it's actually very complicated. white structure is a little bit spoiled. I mean, in terms of the pawns on c3 and c2. But for these pawns, white got the control over the center, and now they have the two-pair bishop advantage. While after black takes on b3, there will be just a bishop versus the knight.
Yeah, I think this has been instructive thus far with black not taking this bishop on b3 because the bishop's not going anywhere. If we look at the bishop squares, c4, not available. d5, I'll just take it with my knight on f6. That leaves a4, but what's your bishop doing out on a4? Nothing useful. So Humpy's been smart to delay this capture on b3. There will be a time where she can't forget about it, but especially now that d5 has happened, why would I take your bishop on b3? It's not doing anything.
Yes, and why to improve white structure? I'm not sure about the d5 move, but I think Alexandra was concerned about black playing c5. That's why she decided to go for d5, and Humpy did take on b3 right away.
So she said, ignore that guy, Robert. He says things that you don't have to listen to. But actually, I do think that taking on b3 was not a good decision. There was no reason to do that. And I don't know what White's plan exactly was, but it certainly didn't scare me. And now I don't like the fact that there's a semi-open A file for White to use. c4, bishop d2, double rooks in the A file, play for b4. It feels like White should be the side with the better chances because she controls the pawn breaks.
It sounds like you already have a 10 moves plan, but it's a good plan. So while black's plan, I think they are going to play b6, and they will try to push f5 somehow. b6, knight to c5, then f5. Let's see what will happen. b6.
And
b6 was played.
Alexandra is extremely concentrated. I just pulled her up on camera. She's trying to figure a way how to chisel through here. She did play b4, which means the knight can't go to c5, and this pawn on c7 is a glaring weakness when White plays queen to c4 at some point, or rook a3 to c3 if I can try to lift my rook. Not easy to do with black's rook on a8, but I mean, White clearly is better here.
And once again, look at the clock.
Oh, I didn't even look.
I mean, I think that viewers will start to hate us about mentioning this in every game, but it's a really important thing in the match and in every game. You may have a good position, but when you have no time, you start blundering something, and that is what happened in many of games played by Humpy, unfortunately.
I like that move knight g8, though, to go knight e7. So she is continuing to play super well. She just has 13 seconds, so she plays well for like 15 moves, then one bad move and her position is just over with. And Alexandra has built up a nice position here, finally plays c5. But Humpy, trying to fend off here. Now what do you do? Rook b8, okay. Rook to b2 coming, perhaps?
It depends where the queen go, maybe queen d7 just now.
Oh, I don't like that move.
I don't like it either, because now the c7 pawn is a clear weakness.
Rook b2, queen g5 coming, though? This is...
g5? Though it's not so easy.
I think you have to stop rook b2. I would play... I can't play rook d2. That hangs a rook, so ignore me. So queen c2 played to stop rook b2. That feels much better, much safer for White. And knight h4 attacks f3 with check. The pawn g2 is pinned. But this is where...
King h1?
Yeah, you can play king h1. You can play queen f2.
Queen f2.
Having extra time at this moment shows why it's so valuable, because now Alexandra can say, whoa, let me spend 15 seconds and figure out the best way to defend my king.
Yes, queen f2, maybe then bishop e3. So I prefer queen f2.
And then rook to b3, I guess I'll play if you move a queen over there, because I just want to take away the e3 square, put pressure on f3. Okay.
Rook f1 was played. That's a little bit unpredictable. Early set.
She plays g3. It's not under attack just yet, but the knight moves back. There was a pin on the g3 pawn, but still. h5, h4 coming. I really like the way Humpy's playing this. I'm just looking at the 3.4 seconds and don't think that's enough.
Yes, h4.
Okay. No, h3 is not good. Just take it. Free pawn.
Another?
Okay, that was actually a good move, I guess. Ooh.
Queen f3. Oh, look.
Who's... Oh my gosh, this kingdom is so unsafe over here. I don't even see a move. Bishop b6, knight f4 check, and queen h5 mate.
Oh god.
Oh my gosh, Humpy!
I mean, how could you win this game with 3 seconds?
Humpy!
I would have lost it 100 times. 100
times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 100 times. 1
Truly unbelievable.
And Alexandra, I mean, we had her on camera. She just like kind of wiped her forehead and was like, "What the heck did I do there? I was up on time. I was up a pawn at that point. I was the one who was pressuring." But that goes to show that king safety is probably the most important thing in a bullet scramble, even more than having 2 extra pawns or 1 extra pawn. It's about the king, and the king became unsafe, and now it's a tied matchup.
Yes, Humpy leveled the score, and I think Alexandra is very disappointed, especially by the last game, because she was pressing the whole game, and I think she was already expecting to win it, while she lost what was really not her plan.
No, and I'm bringing Humpy back on camera, still stoic, still just focusing on the chess. And what an amazing game that was. I have to give Humpy so much credit for knight g8 to e7, to kick that queen out of c6 and give herself some chances. She rerouted her knight from f6 to g8 to e7 to g6 to h4, and then ended up winning the game because of that knight. So well done by Humpy. Alexandra has been playing extremely well. There are just these moments where it feels like she can either put Humpy away better, or in Humpy's time trouble, she's struggling to figure out, do I play very quickly and try to flag her, or do I take more time and then try to come up with the right approach? It's not easy. I don't have the answers. I'm not, this superhuman bullet player. I don't know.
Yeah. Also, I'd like to mention this plan by Humpy h5, h4, h3. I think it was a very good plan, and thanks to this plan, basically she won the game in the end. So. And now Alexandra is taking much more time. I think she doesn't like her opposition so much, or maybe she's still sad because of her last 2 games, which she lost. I don't know.
I'm looking at d takes c5 here, Anna. You have to take with the pawn on c5, otherwise you lose g7.
But then when you take back with the pawn, the c5 pawn is weak. The knight will come to c4, and still you can't develop the bishop because the pawn on g7 would be hanging while a3 was played. This is a bit strange.
I wonder if she thought that she believed Kostenyk's bluff, that if she had just, I'm going to show this very quickly, if she had taken on c5, bishop c5, bishop takes g7, she probably thought it wasn't possible because of rook g8. And maybe it's not a bluff. That actually looks kind of serious with the bishop on b7, the rook on g8, hitting the g2 pawn. There's some potential for the attack. Probably with an engine on, white can take the pawn and run with it. In a blitz game, I don't really think so. So maybe I kind of overstated just how problematic the position was. Instead, we see a calmer approach here, and to my eyes, Anna, I think that white is still better.
It looks like still better for white, and h3, it was an prophylax. Look, long castle. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh. Placing the king on c8 while the c file is opened.
I'm sorry, I just can't believe in this.
Maybe the position wasn't so pleasant because she couldn't develop the bishop, she couldn't go with castling short, so she didn't know what to do, and she came up with this idea castling long, and then she thinks she will quickly put the king on b8 and then on a7, but still it's much more easier for white to create the attack after that. I mean, just...
I'm still in disbelief. Castling queenside?
Have you seen castling queenside in the Queen's Gambit accepted type of structures?
So I played a game against Tamir Nabati in the Isle of Man 2019, and I was white, and I castled queenside after playing d4, and I got absolutely crushed. And I deserved it. And during the game, I was thinking to myself, this is probably not good, but I'm curious. Like, it's going to make an interesting game. Let's see if I can somehow withstand the pressure. The answer was no, don't do it again. So I learned my lesson not to castle queenside into a potential attack, and here it just seems so easy for white to play, although there's not a knockout just yet. So I would play bishop d6 for Alexandra, just try to help this knight on c7, threaten the pawn h2. You have to finish your development. I don't see a clear win for white, so the game continues.
It's bishop d6, and if there was no bishop on d3, you would have a nice trap threatening bishop takes h2. But if you play bishop d6, white may go knight c4, attacking the bishop and attacking the b6 pawn.
Yeah.
F6
You're right.
was played.
Not a move that you really want to play, but now we're both sides just over 40 seconds, and we're getting into more of the bullet. And this is the last game of the 3 minute plus 1 second time control, which means that they better get their bullet practice in now because the bullet games will start after this time portion.
All right, before I like this move because sometimes you may play b5 after all, trying to open even more lines.
Bishop takes f6. That's not a good move. That's a really bad move.
What's prepared? G4, but okay, even if white just retreats the knight.
Whoa.
I think it was the blunder, unfortunately.
Still some chances because the king on g1 really isn't entirely safe, not out of the woods just yet. But of course, white is up material and just much better. So, Humpy, 17 seconds? She's played very well in time trouble. I'm always nervous for her, even if she's never nervous.
And knight f1, good defensive move. Now she can move the knight from f3.
Okay, but the threat is often strong in the execution, right? So some kind of knight f3 check is coming. Okay, now it's not.
Bishop e4, knight g3, or knight. She's just trying to trade all the pieces.
I don't really like that capture. I'm going to be honest with you, because now knight f3 check. Knight f3 check was probably winning for black.
Knight f3 take. Yeah, and then queen g4.
Oh, and the rook's hanging on d1.
But look.
Oh my gosh.
Not over yet. Queen. It was a check. Okay.
Because Steinitz takes all the pieces. Oh my gosh, she won the game.
Can we go back to where the action actually started? So maybe to the moment with knight f3, when there was this possibility to play knight f3. Let's call it.
Before knight to c4. So bishop takes d5, I think, was not good. And then after knight b3, knight f3 check was probably just crushing.
Seems like that.
Because if you don't take, I win this pawn on h2, and I'm going to checkmate you with your king on h1. If you take, I take with my pawn, and now my threat is queen h3, queen g2 checkmate, and there's nothing you can do to stop it without giving up your queen.
And what happened in the game? She played knight c4.
Oh my gosh, she played knight to c4, and rook takes c4 was played. That's what you call a time trouble. I'm nervous. I don't really know what to do, so I'm going to try to take your piece, which turned out to be extremely bad because the bishop on g2 was strong and the rooks were staring each other down. So after queen takes c4, which was another mistake, mistakes often come in pairs, bishop takes h2 check, and thank you for this rook down on d1.
Yeah, so basically she was trying to simplify the position, she was trying to give the exchange, and then she thought she would be 2 pawns up, but unfortunately she missed bishop takes h2, and then the position was lost because black was materially up, and also then the pin was very unpleasant. I mean, I think it was a really very important game for Alexandra because she lost the previous 2 games and she had difficult times in this game as well. So if she lost it, she would be the one who was down according to the score, but now she's still leading. So we are coming to 1+1, the most exciting portion, and I would really love to see that.
Well, we're going to take our break now. When we return, we will have the bullet, and it will be for the championship of this 4th Grand Prix leg and for a spot in the super final. Alexandra Kosteniuk needs to win. She is up a point. We'll see if she's able to do this when the FIDE Chess.com Women's Speed Chess Championship continues after this short break. And as we return, just want to remind everybody what's at stake here. It is 12 points, Grand Prix points for first place with $3,000. Second place gets 8 points and $2,000. And why that is so important is because as we look at the leaderboard, 12 points on the line. Alexandra Kosteniuk had 12 entering this Grand Prix leg. If she wins it, gets 12 points, you'll see she will be in first place ahead of Anna Ushanina and ahead of Valentina Gunina. So Gunina and Kosteniuk are teammates for the Russian team. But here, Anna, I think that Valentina has to root against her friend.
I'm not sure. I'm really not sure because I know that girls in the Russian team, they have good relations between each other. So I don't think like Gunina is praying for Hampi to win. But of course, she wants to play in the super finals. So she would maybe prefer Hampi to win, but not like she's willing it too much. Well,
Right.
Anyway,
Yeah,
we may ask Valentina about it later on.
It's very hard because, like you said, they're friends. You don't want to root against your friend, but you're also rooting for yourself. And we are off. We are starting this bullet portion. Kosteniuk gets the white pieces in the first game here. And we have, guess what? Another Petrov.
But another line, bishop d3.
Aren't we spoiled? The new line that we get to analyze, the bishops come back to c2, white's playing d4. And it sort of looks like these Berlins where instead of the main lines, you play these like rookie one, slower approaches because the symmetrical pawn structure. And Anna, do you think that this is a good choice for Alexandra, considering she's up a point in the match?
Maybe she decided to play more safer, and this line is definitely safer and easier to play. She's playing very quickly. She's already 10 seconds ahead in the clock. Knight came to e3. Maybe it's a good strategical decision to change the line because also somehow the opponent is already ready that you will play knight c3, and here you change the line. So Hampi had to think what she was going to do, how would she place her pieces, and so on.
Also, these positions take forever. Like even if black somehow wins this game, which I don't know how that's going to happen in this position, but the point is that in order to do so, it really takes many moves, and Kosteniuk's up a game. There's only now 8 minutes and 45 seconds in the overall match. It's a smart strategy, I'd say.
But look at this. Even the position was looking so calm, but Alexandra did play g4. Of course, you know, when you have this inside yourself and when you are a dynamical player, you're really searching for some exciting moves, and she did play g4. I am not sure it was such a good decision because g4 opened the king. Now there might be some problems over the f file.
But the clock, extra 20 seconds for Alexandra.
It's not so easy. Bishop e4 is a good move now. Knight g5.
Ooh, knight g5 was a better version of knight d2 for sure.
Yes, because knight g5 was not only attacking on e4, but there was the idea of queen b3. Okay.
Very complex position here. I prefer black's position because white's king is less safe, but of course I prefer Alexandra's time.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say, that you prefer his black position, but you prefer Alexandra's time.
Oh, but I also now prefer white's position after queen g4.
I am reading your thoughts.
You are. You're getting to know me. It's unfortunate for you, if you can read my thoughts. And we see a trade on e4, and now white stole a pawn and has the extra time. Queen e3 threatens rook to e8, and rook e8's game
Rook
over.
8, rook
And if
e8,
queen b4, c5.
c5? c5, important move. Yes, she found it.
And that's game. Queen e6
Queen
check.
e6 and mate.
c5
Wow.
cut the queen off from the f8 square. That was very important.
So Alexandra won this game, and this was a very important point because now she has a 2-point lead.
She does indeed, and she's so focused. I'm going to bring her up on camera right now. She's really just like locked in, head, forehead down, as chess players tend to do. They have the camera right, and she's a streamer, and she knows how to work the camera. You just forget about it when you're in the middle of a game and you're staring down at your screen.
Yes, also you put your computer a little bit how it's more comfortable for you, but it's not so comfortable for the viewers to see your camera. Anyway, of course, for Alexandra, it's a very important match, and we shouldn't speak how she should put the camera because, of course, it's more important how she will put her pieces instead of the camera in the game. And in this game, I think she's doing very well.
I agree. I mean, she's completed her development. The knight at c3 is pinned. That's Wait, rook c8 now? Can I just keep piling up pressure on this piece?
Yes, and she will not go for long castling. No way. No way in this game.
She did win that game, but I think that it was not because she castled long. Wait, knight takes c3, and then queen g5, threatening checkmate, threatening the bishop on b5.
Great. Will she
g5.
play queen g5 now? Just go for it. Go for queen g5. This is the move she will...
Oh.
I thought she would play queen g5 because it's the move Alexandra likes to make. But she played bishop c3, queen d7. Queen d7 was perhaps the only move. So what's happening? The bishop on c3 is under the attack, so black has to go rook d8. Yeah, she played it. Bishop e6.
Ooh, good move. You steal a
Good
pawn.
move. Bishop d2.
Rook c7.
Rook c7. Bishop a6. Okay, I mean, with every move they are trying to attack something, but white was a little bit more precise.
And Humpy is up some time here, so... sorry, up some time. She's up a pawn, but down quite a bit of time. And I like Humpy's chances in this game.
What's happening now? Rook a4, maybe, attacking the a2 pawn.
Yeah.
Rook c2?
Okay, that's the problem. f4, this rook takes a2, so you're losing the pawn here. Knight d6. Ooh. Wait, bishop e1. Oh, the rook's protected on a7.
Yes.
Oh.
Rook f2, okay. Rook g2, knight d6.
And if f5, there's like king e5, king f6, or king e6. That's scary.
Yeah, I'm not sure. No, Alexander went for f5. I wasn't sure about that. Rook e2.
Okay, so knight c4 back, and then b5. Nah, just take the knight away.
b5, very nice move. I hope Alexander would play. Now she did play bishop f2. Bishop e3,
Wait, king f6? Oh my gosh. Oh, this is bad. Bishop takes f4, but king f6.
King f6, bishop d4, knight e5 was the right version to do it.
Yeah, this unfortunately loses the piece. It's pinned to the king on e6. Yeah.
Alexandra won that game, and I believe that by winning this game, she already won the match. I think we can already congratulate Alexandra on winning the match, winning the tournament, and winning the spot in the super final. Well done.
She has indeed. I mean, what an impressive performance from Alexandra Kostyanyuk throughout the entirety of the WSCC. She finished in third place in 2 different legs, and finally, at long as she's made that breakthrough and is taking first place. And Humpy Koneru has been a really tough customer. She beat Valentina Gunina. In fact, it's because of Humpy beating Valentina Gunina that Alexandra was even in a... Well, no, actually, that's not true. She would have been ahead of Ushinina. So I take it back. But the point is that Humpy has been excellent. She beat Gunina. She beat Hu Yifan. And she's been playing really well on this final. But Alexandra has been a little bit sharper and certainly has been quicker.
Yes, Alexandra is known to be an experienced player when we speak about online chess. I think she has played many games, many tournaments. So for her, it was some kind of advantage that she tried it before the tournament started. But, well, we were all in the same situation. We could try to play more online games before. And yes, sad for Valentina, but really deserved victory for Alexandra. And she really showed a stable play. And in general, her moves and her ideas, okay, she blundered the piece in this game, but...
So wait, what were you saying about her great play?
But in general, she really showed a great play. And this game is not over. f6, another piece, okay. So this is not the best game of Alexandra, but we have seen many of the great games.
That's sort of what you call a commentator's curse, where you're saying things and the opposite happens, but it's okay. She's already built herself such a big lead that she can afford to lose this game.
True. I think that she has to keep this game going just in case. I mean, just don't resign. Try to make some moves to prolong the time. Because if she resigns now, she will have to play one more game or maybe one more. And this is not in her favor. I mean, speaking about the score situation.
Yeah, and I mean, Alexandra also has... the second tiebreak is game points, right? The number of individual games you won throughout the entirety of the a women's speedchess championship, her score is by far the most. She won her first match against Gunay Mamadzada 11-0. So Alexandra's been amazing this whole time. I really don't think that any player is more deserving than she is. I don't really like using the word deserving just because what does that mean? It's pretty subjective. It just has been clear from the very first match of this entire event that she has been in great shape over the chessboard.
Yeah, she's still trying to fight in this game, but of course, when you're 2 pieces down, it's not so easy to do so. Though she already regained. Oh, rook f3. Very nice tactical trick, and now the mate by Humpy.
Yeah,
Good.
Really...
So perhaps this is the last game for today.
It will be the last game because unless for some reason Alexandra resigns in the next 15 seconds, by the official match clock, it will be the final game. And of course, Alexandra would never resign. She would, even if she was losing, she would waste time until the match clock went out. And as we see, 8 seconds, 7, 6, 5. I can stop counting, but you get the point. This is the final game of this Grand Prix.
True. c5. I don't like so much Alexandra's position because the rook may come to f6, another rook to f1. I believe white is pressing more.
You're right. And the bishop can come to g5 for Alexandra just to stop this annoying rook f6 idea. Although queen g5 hits e3, it's probably just more aggressive and smarter.
And bishop c1. Defend the e3 pawn. What can black do now? Queen g3. When Alexandra has the possibility, she always goes for some active options.
And actually, this active choice that she made is probably the best defensive choice. That sounds weird to say, but sometimes people think, oh, let me just be ultra defensive, protect everything, and then you still get a worse position, your opponent has easy play, and your life is increasingly challenged. Whereas here, with the queen on g3, the bishop on h6, she's creating threats and making Humpy's life more difficult, not easy to come up with a way to push forward.
Trading the queens was a good decision by Humpy, and now her king is closer to the center. She's still creating some ideas. She's still better, definitely, but it's not easy to convert it. Maybe c4. c4, bishop b2. I thought about something like that. Or rook d8, not bad.
Yeah, I want to somehow activate my dark square bishop. You know, bishop e1, bishop e1, bishop d2, bishop e1, bishop h4. Try to get that bishop in. It takes a long time. I know it's not realistic.
I was thinking about pushing the pawns on the queen side, something like before, if a5.
And now we have a pure endgame with many doubled e-pawns, 4 in a row. I feel like I'm looking at connect 4 here. And
now be careful, king e7, and there was the trap of the bishop. In fact,
a5 was really nice because you can't take with the bishop on a5, bishop a3 check, and b4 traps black's bishop.
And also she created the a4 square for her bishop, so a5 was a really great move.
Bishop e8 just wins, no? Yeah, there it is.
Bishop e8, bishop f7. Pac-Man game. Your favorite, and suddenly it became my favorite game too.
I'm glad you are quoting one of my favorite little chess terms that hasn't existed until I'm trying to will it into existence.
Yes, Humpy is bringing the king to c3. King c3 and then b4. She's slowly improving her position, and Humpy's technique was quite good, as we have seen. c5. Will she move c5?
She won the e4 pawn, which is an unimportant pawn because it was a double pawn. So by stealing that pawn, you're not creating a pass or anything, but you are happy to have your bishop.
But better to have it.
Yes. Although, how do you break through here for white?
How do I break through?
Bishop f1.
Bishop f1. King d7. King c7.
This is a weird position.
With 7 seconds, of course. Bishop 6, bishop f5, bishop d5, bishop f3.
And just king back.
Maybe it's already a draw.
It looks like it because the e pawn is pretty much even material, even though white's have a pawn, because white's extra pawn is doubled, and that's not happening. Oh, black's better now. Bishop takes g4, and then h5, h4, h3. Pretty straightforward plan. Oh gosh, nothing is going right for Humpy down the stretch here.
G4, yes. Seems like Alexandra, is she winning? It's a draw.
Oh, it's a draw now. What a crazy way to finish this crazy match. Congratulations are in order for Alexandra Kostyniuk, and I'm pretty sure we will have her. No, I'm positive, not pretty sure. We will have her on for an interview. So we're going to go to a break quickly so we can get her set up. We can interview her and hear the champion's thoughts, not just of this fourth leg, but the entire Grand Prix cycle in this Women's Speeches Championship.
Yes, congratulations to Alexandra, and we will see her soon. You can ask her the questions, so you may even write your questions in the chat, and maybe we will ask Alexandra some of them.
We'll be back shortly, everybody. Write your questions in chat, and we will have Alexandra Kostyniuk available to you in just a few. And we return here with the champion, that is Grandmaster Alexandra Kostyuk. Huge congratulations on what was a really thrilling final match.
Thank you, Robert.
How are you feeling?
Tired and hot. It's hot. I don't have AC and it's like plus 30 outside. And as you can see, I mean, after the games, after such games that I played, the temperature went up a few more degrees. So
I believe now you're really relieved. Congratulations from me too. It was a very exciting match. I really loved commentating on it. Congrats for the games. Congrats for winning this match, this tournament, and for qualifying to the super final.
Yes, thank you, Anna. Of course, it's a very nice surprise. You see, they're celebrating my victory.
They were ready to do that.
Right. So, it was a very nice surprise because, the tournament had such a strong field. And of course, I didn't have any plans to get to the top 2. Of course, I thought that I would try, but then again, it was very hard, especially after Anna Ushenina and Valentina Gunina, like brilliant performances in 3 first tournament. And but then somehow Hampi, I said I have to say thank you to Hampi because she won against Valentina and then against Huifan. This tournament for her, she played a few incredible matches, and actually she was very close to even the score in my match. But I'm quite tired, very happy, but I need to prepare for tomorrow, which is absolutely I didn't have obviously any chance to prepare because here in knockout events, you have to take step by step, match by match, while Anna had already a few days for preparation and for rest. So, okay, I won't complain, but definitely some homework to do before tomorrow.
Well, let me ask you, Alexandra, she had rest, but you also have the practice. And sometimes, especially in like quicker time controls, having the mouse speed just by practice can be useful. So, if you could choose, would you rather have played the day before the final or have had the rest and more preparation?
Rest and more preparation. But since I don't have any choice, because we should not forget that this the final match will not be as it will have longer time control, so we'll play almost for 3 hours playing time. It's gonna be 90 minutes with 5+1, 60 minutes with 3+1, and then 30 more minutes with 1+1. So definitely, in Blitz, it's the most important thing is to stay fresh, because preparation, okay, when you say prepare, it's a very nice and beautiful word, but for a Blitz match, it's kind of not so clear. And sometimes you prepare and then things just don't go the way you want it to go in the openings that you chose. So you need to switch and play something else. And but anyway, since I don't have any other choice, I'm happy to play the way I am right now.
Yes, Alexandra, therefore we will not keep you so long. We will give you more time to rest and more time to prepare for tomorrow's match. Just a few words about today's match. Which moment do you think was the crucial one? Which game really influenced the most? And when did you start to feel that you're actually the one who will most probably win this match?
When I grabbed the pawn on a6 in the last game.
Good question.
No, that was the point. That moment I knew I'm not gonna lose. Unless something really bad happens with the internet or I give up a bishop. But that was like the crucial point. But if Of course, I didn't have a chance to analyze and go over the games that I played, but definitely I had a very difficult moment when I was leading and I had a superior position playing with white, and I had like 2 extra pawns, I think, and a huge time advantage. But then I blundered a pawn on f3, and suddenly I completely lost. I didn't know what to do. Time was ticking, and Again, I blundered one more time, this time mate in 2. So that was painful. And then the next game, I played terribly. I think long side castle in this kind of queen's gambit. With this symmetrical structure, it just showed that I was not, calm enough, and my decisions were influenced by the loss that I just suffered. And of course, I think, that was the crucial moment that I blundered the pawn on f6 and almost rook, and then somehow managed to win. Of course, it would have been much harder if I'd lose this game.
Right. And well, let me ask you, I guess, one final question, because throughout the match, you were well ahead on the clock. Do you think that put some psychological pressure on you to play quickly to try to beat her on time? And she was playing extremely well, even though she only had 3 to 5 seconds in plenty of moments.
Well, that's how Humpy performed throughout all this tournament. So I didn't really expect it to change in the last match. Although I must say she surprised me in the last 2 games because she really, increased her speed of playing. And I was suffering this last 2 games when she started to play faster. And but usually, I prefer to be ahead of time. It doesn't put any extra pressure on me. Vice versa, I would say. I enjoy being like a few minutes ahead of my opponent.
I think you're not the only one. I would also prefer to have more time in each of my games.
Right.
Well, Alexandra, we're so appreciative that you joined us. We are thrilled that we were able to cover that match. It was really an epic one, and the whole audience that's been viewing it was really mesmerized by your play. So huge congratulations, and we'll see you tomorrow in the super final.
Thank you, Robert, Tana. See you tomorrow.
Have a good one. And that was Grandmaster Alexandra Kostyniuk. As I pull up the leaderboard here, you'll recognize a familiar face in first place. That is Grandmaster Kostyniuk. She was able to win the Grand Prix portion of things with a huge tiebreak score, 86.5 game points. And as you look down the list here, Katerina Lacno, who finishes in 4th place in terms of Grand Prix points, was in 2nd in tiebreak 2 with 73. So Anna, 86.5 points. She was crushing people.
It's a lot, but this criteria, one may think it's not really, the most fair one, because some people played more games, some people had additional tie breaks, which gives you more games and more possibilities to get more points. But if we were speaking about some little difference like 69 and 68 points, as we see between Anna Oshenina and Valentina Gunina, it's one story. But when we see 86.5 versus 68 or 69, of course, it's a huge difference, which basically proves that Alexandra really had many good matches, and she got really a lot of points, and she's the well-deserved winner of the overall tournament. Well, not the overall tournament because the super final will be tomorrow, but the leader at this point.
Yeah, just sort of crazy to think about, because as I look through these scores here, as long as you made it to the semifinals, and even if you end up in 4th place, you play the same amount of matches as somebody who won the Grand Prix leg, right? Because if you make the semifinals, you lose, you still have the 3rd place match. So because Alexandra was able to make it to 2 different 3rd place matches, and she won both of those, and then she was able to win this final leg here. She played many games, but she played a similar amount of games, or similar matches, I should say, as, for example, as someone like Sara Kadem, who made it to 3 different semifinals and then 3 different 3rd place matches. And unfortunately for her, she was not able to win those semifinals or 3rd place matches. But congrats to Sara, because she did really well. And I don't know what else to say on it. It was really just a fun time.
Yes, I also liked it a lot. Thank you, Robert. Thanks for being my partner today. Thanks for commentating together. And thanks to the girls, because all of them, Hui Fan, Sarah Hadamal-Sharikh, Alexandra Kostanyuk, and Hampi Konaro, they both showed good play, and there were many nice games today. Thank you all. I really liked this day, and I enjoyed it a lot.
Well, Anna, it certainly was a pleasure to cover the action with you today. It was a lot of fun. And for everybody who's been here, thank you so much for viewing this FIDE-Chess.com Women's Speed Chess Championship. We will continue tomorrow. I'll bring up the schedule. I don't want to forget about that because some people are like, wait, what's going on? Oh, I don't even have a schedule thing for tomorrow. But it's tomorrow, same time, same place. That is 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, unless I'm mistaken, which I hope I'm not. Let me just verify that because I don't want to mislead you, lead you astray. But either way, my main point was thank you so much to you, Anna. Thank you so much to our viewers. Thank you so much to our moderators, to the staff who's working so hard behind the scenes to make sure that the tournament is running smoothly, that all players are aware of the time controls, of when the next match is going to start, when their breaks are. So everyone deserves a shout out who has made this event what it is. And so with that, okay. Tomorrow is 7 a.m. Pacific start time, which is 10 a.m. Eastern. So before you leave, go to your Google Calendar or wherever you put your calendar, and I don't know where you live, but 7 a.m. Pacific time, get that conversion, put in your calendar, and that's when the super final will begin. Whew, gosh.
Yes, good job, Robert. You already said everything what was really important to say, and yeah, tomorrow we'll know the winner of the tournament. So tomorrow the most exciting match between Alexandra Kostanyuk and Anna Oshenina will start. So come, join, comment, enjoy, and just play chess, because tomorrow is International Chess Day, a big celebration. So it's really nice that we have a match and we have this holiday too. So
well, how do you celebrate the International Chess Day?
How do I celebrate? Tomorrow I will go to the post office because the new stamps will be released. New stamps featuring me and my sister.
Oh,
so they will be nice ones.
Whoa!
I think I'll be able to show them to the viewers later on the streams. So stay tuned.
If I give you my address, not live in front of everybody, can you send me a postcard with the stamps?
Sure.
Oh my gosh, there's stamps with you and your sister, and that's so cool.
Yes, we already had ones before, but on that stamps we were really very young. I think I was like 17 on the stamp. But these ones are new and I like them, so they are cute.
Wow,
it's like a secret, a little bit relieved, but not completely.
That is awesome. Well, I am going to have to find these stamps, and that's really cool. For me, well, I'll be having the call tomorrow with Anna Ushanina and Alexander Kostanyuk. It's only fitting that I spend International Chess Day commentating chess, because that seems to be what I do with all of my waking hours. But until then, everybody, enjoy the chess. We'll be back tomorrow for more coverage for the super final of this FIDE-Chess.com Women's Speed Chess Championship. And Anna, thank you once more for joining me for the call today.
Thank you, Roberto. Thanks a lot. See you next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.